They called her defective, barren, worthless. So when her father owed a debt to Manhattan's most feared crime lord, he didn't offer his beautiful younger daughter. He offered Lillian, payment in human form. But the monster who bought her didn't want her body. He wanted her stories. Night after night, she spoke to a shadow with golden eyes, never knowing the beast listening in the dark was the same ruthless man who owned her days, until the night she took a bullet meant for him and discovered some curses can only be broken by love. If you're ready for a story about the woman nobody wanted who became the only one who mattered, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The apartment in Queens smelled like overcooked cabbage and desperation. Lillian Hart stood in the narrow hallway outside her father's bedroom, her hand pressed against the peeling wallpaper, listening to voices she wasn't meant to hear. The wood was thin enough that every word carried through like poison seeping under a door. "The debt is considerable, Mr. Hart." The voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge that suggested violence was always an option, never a surprise. $300,000, plus interest accumulated over 18 months. I know. Her father's voice cracked. Gerald Hart had once been a man of stature, a small business owner with dreams of expansion. Now he was just another broken gambler who'd made promises to the wrong people. "I just need more time. Another month. I have prospects. Prospects don't pay debts." A different voice this time, harder, the kind of voice that had watched men beg and remained unmoved. "Mr. DeLuca doesn't extend credit based on prospects." Lillian closed her eyes. DeLuca. Victor DeLuca. Even in Queens, far from the glittering towers of Manhattan, that name carried weight. The youngest crime lord to ever control the 5 families. A man who'd consolidated power through strategic brilliance and ruthless efficiency. Newspapers called him the Prince of Darkness. The tabloids whispered about his reclusiveness, his refusal to be photographed, the way he conducted business from shadows. "I have assets." Her father's desperation was palpable now. The shop is mortgaged beyond its value. "We've done our research, Mr. Hart. You have nothing of material worth." A pause. But Mr. DeLuca is not unreasonable. He understands that debt takes many forms. Payment can be alternative. Lillian's stomach turned cold. "What do you mean?" Gerald's voice dropped to a whisper. "You have 2 daughters." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. "Sophia's engaged," Gerald said quickly. Too quickly. "To the Castellano boy. Good family. The wedding is in 3 months. We're not interested in Sophia." The smooth voice held a note of amusement. "We're interested in the other one, Lillian." Her name in that stranger's mouth felt like a violation. "Lillian?" Gerald sounded genuinely confused. "But she's divorced, and she can't. The doctor said she can't have children." Mr. DeLuca is aware of her circumstances. It's precisely why she's suitable. Lillian's hand fell away from the wall. She should have felt shock, outrage, terror. Instead, what flooded through her was a sick, familiar recognition. Of course it would be her, not Sophia with her glossy dark hair and perfect laugh. Not Sophia who'd attracted suitors since she was 16. Not Sophia who would carry on the family name, produce grandchildren, make their mother smile with pride. The defective daughter, the one who'd failed at marriage, the one whose body had betrayed her with its emptiness, the one nobody wanted. Until now. "What would he want with her?" Gerald asked. Not a refusal, a question. Lillian heard it clearly. Her father was negotiating her price. "That's not your concern. Consider it a service arrangement. Lillian will enter Mr. DeLuca's household. The debt will be forgiven, clean slate." "For how long?" "As long as Mr. DeLuca requires." Another silence, shorter this time. When Gerald spoke again, his voice had changed, hardened, made a decision. "She'll do it." Just like that. 3 words. She'll do it. Not a question posed to her. Not a family discussion. A transaction completed. Lillian turned away from the door and walked back to the room she shared with Sophia. Her sister was out, dress shopping for the wedding, probably, or having lunch with her fiancé's mother. The room was divided down an invisible line. Sophia's side was all cream and gold, makeup artfully arranged, photographs of smiling friends. Lillian's side was books, Stacks and stacks of them, scavenged from thrift stores and library sales. Stories that took her away from this cramped apartment, this suffocating life. She sat on her narrow bed and waited. Her father came 20 minutes later. He didn't knock. He rarely did anymore. Why show respect to the daughter who'd brought shame on the family by failing to give her ex-husband an heir? Lillian. He stood in the doorway, not quite meeting her eyes. We need to talk. I heard. Her voice was steady, calm. She'd learned years ago that emotion was wasted on people who wouldn't value it. Gerald flinched. You were listening. The walls are thin. She folded her hands in her lap. You sold me to Victor DeLuca for $300,000. It's not like that. What's it like then? She looked at him directly. Her father was 53 but looked older, worn down by poor choices and worse luck. There'd been a time when she'd loved him, when she'd been 7 years old and he'd taught her to ride a bike, when she'd been 12 and he'd come to her school play. That man was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. Maybe desperation just revealed what was always there. It's a job, Gerald said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. Like being a maid or a cook. You'll work in his household. It's respectable. Respectable. Lillian tasted the word. Is that what you'll tell people? That your daughter has a respectable position? You'll tell them nothing. The hardness returned. As far as anyone knows, you've taken a private nursing position upstate. You're leaving Queens. You won't contact us. Won't or can't? Does it matter? Gerald's face twisted. You're 32 years old, Lillian, divorced, living in your father's house with no prospects. What future do you have here? At least this way, you're useful. You're paying back what this family owes. The cruelty was casual, unthinking. He genuinely believed he was being practical. When? Lillian asked. Tomorrow, dawn. A car will come for you. That's it? No negotiation? No discussion about what he wants from me? Gerald looked away. They said he needs someone to talk to, someone educated. You read all those books. You can do that. Someone to talk to. The euphemism was almost funny. Almost. What if I refuse? Lillian kept her voice level, curious. She already knew the answer. You won't. Gerald met her eyes finally, and what she saw there was worse than anger. It was indifference. Because you know Sophia's wedding depends on this debt being cleared. Because you know your mother's medication costs money we don't have. Because for once in your life you can actually contribute something valuable. Valuable. The word hung between them like smoke. Pack light, Gerald said, already turning to leave. They said you won't need much. Everything will be provided. He left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't apologize. Didn't look back. Lillian sat in the silence of her half room and felt nothing. No tears, no rage, just a hollow recognition that her worth had finally been quantified and found wanting. She wasn't valuable enough to keep, but she was valuable enough to sell. She stood and began to pack. The car arrived exactly at dawn, black and sleek and utterly out of place on their shabby street. Lillian watched it from her bedroom window as the sky shifted from black to gray. A driver emerged, tall, expressionless, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her father's monthly rent. Her mother appeared in the doorway as Lillian zipped her small suitcase closed. Catherine Hart looked fragile in her bathrobe, graying hair uncombed, hands trembling slightly from the Parkinson's that had been stealing her piece by piece for 5 years. Lillian, her voice was soft, sad, but not sad enough to stop this. Mom, your father explained everything. Did he? It wasn't a question. Catherine twisted her hands together. It's a good opportunity. Real work. You'll be paid well, I'm sure. Lillian studied her mother's face, looking for something. Regret, guilt, love strong enough to intervene. She found only tired acceptance. Catherine had learned long ago to bend to Gerald's decisions. Disagreement took energy she no longer had. You'll write to Sophia? Catherine asked. For the wedding? I'm not allowed contact, remember? Lillian kept her voice gentle. Her mother was sick, weak, not malicious, just absent. The story is I'm upstate, private nursing. Oh, yes. Catherine nodded, already retreating into vagueness. Well, that's respectable work. Everyone kept using that word. Respectable. As if repetition would make it true. Sophia breezed in then, already dressed for the day in a powder blue dress that brought out her eyes. Perfect, as always. She looked at Lillian's suitcase with mild curiosity. You're really going? Apparently. Sophia tilted her head. It's probably for the best. Things have been so awkward with you here. Awkward, Lillian repeated. You know what I mean. Sophia's smile was apologetic, but not particularly sorry. After the divorce, the way people talk, it reflects on the family. She brightened. But this way you'll have a fresh start, and we can tell people you're doing important work. Medical care is very noble. Noble. Respectable. Useful. The words they'd chosen to dress up a sale. I hope you'll be happy, Sophia said, and Lillian thought she might actually mean it. Her sister wasn't cruel. She was just incapable of imagining that anyone's pain might matter as much as her own comfort. I'll try, Lillian said. The doorbell rang. Catherine flinched. Sophia looked toward the stairs expectantly. Lillian picked up her suitcase and walked out of the room. Down the narrow stairs. Past her father, who stood by the door, unable to look at her. She paused just once, studying his profile. Goodbye, Dad. Gerald said nothing. The driver took her suitcase without a word and held the car door open. Lillian climbed in, the leather seats cool beneath her palms. Through the tinted window, she watched her family's building recede. Her mother in the window, one hand raised. Sophia beside her, already turning away to start her day. Gerald invisible. The Queen's streets gave way to highways, then bridges. Manhattan rose before them, all glass and steel and impossible heights. Lillian had been to the city before, museums on school trips, a few restaurants when her marriage was still pretending to work. But she'd never belonged here. This was a place for the powerful and the beautiful, for people who mattered, not for defective daughters sold to pay debts. The driver navigated through morning traffic with practiced ease, heading uptown where the buildings grew taller and the streets grew cleaner. They turned onto Fifth Avenue, passing landmarks Lillian recognized from books. The Metropolitan Museum. Central Park's eastern border. Buildings with doormen and awnings, where fortunes lived behind brass-plated doors. The car slowed before a limestone mansion that occupied an entire corner. 6 stories of perfectly preserved architecture from the Gilded Age, when robber barons had built monuments to their own wealth. Compared to the glass towers around it, the building looked like something from another era. Timeless. Imposing. Beautiful in a way that didn't ask for admiration. It demanded it. We're here, the driver said. The first words he'd spoken. Lillian stepped out onto the sidewalk and tilted her head back. The mansion loomed above her, windows dark except for a few on the upper floors. No signs, no numbers visible, just old money and older power, condensed into stone. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, 60, gray hair severely pulled back, wearing a black dress that suggested either service or mourning. Her face was lined but sharp, eyes assessing Lillian with quick, brutal efficiency. Miss Hart. Not a question, a statement. I am Mrs. Castellane. I manage this household. Follow me. No welcome, no pleasantries. Lillian followed her into a marble foyer that looked like a museum, checkerboard floors, a chandelier that could probably pay off her father's debt twice over, paintings in ornate frames, a sweeping staircase with a banister of polished mahogany. You will occupy the 4th floor, Mrs. Castellane said as they climbed. Your room, a bathroom, and a sitting area. You are not to explore the other floors without permission. You are not to enter Mr. DeLuca's private quarters under any circumstances. You will take your meals in your rooms unless otherwise instructed. They passed the 2nd floor, a glimpse of formal rooms, more artwork, furniture that belonged in palaces. The 3rd floor, closed doors, silence. The 4th floor was smaller, clearly servants' quarters converted to something more comfortable. Mrs. Castellane opened a door. The room was larger than Lillian's entire space in Queens. A 4-poster bed, a wardrobe, a writing desk by the window overlooking Fifth Avenue. Austere but elegant. Prison or refuge, depending on perspective. The bathroom is through there. Mrs. Castellane pointed. Your presence is required at 8 o'clock this evening. You will be collected from this room. Dress appropriately. I don't have The wardrobe is stocked. Mrs. Castellane's expression didn't change. Mr. DeLuca has specific expectations regarding presentation. Until this evening, you may rest or familiarize yourself with your quarters. Do not leave this floor. Do not attempt to contact anyone outside this house. You no longer have a phone, I presume? Lillian pulled out her old cell phone. Mrs. Castellane took it without asking, dropped it in her pocket. You'll have no need for it, she said. Any questions? 1,000. But Lillian asked the only one that mattered. What does he want from me? For the first time, something flickered in Mrs. Castellane's eyes. Not sympathy exactly, more like recognition, as if she'd heard this question before. He wants what he pays for, she said. Your compliance, your discretion, your presence when requested. She paused at the door. Some advice, Miss Hart. Don't try to understand Mr. DeLuca. Don't try to please him. Don't imagine yourself important. You are a service, nothing more. The women who forget that don't last long. She left. The lock clicked from outside. Lillian stood in her beautiful prison and looked around. The afternoon sun slanted through windows that didn't open. The bed was made with sheets that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. The desk held expensive paper, pens that wrote smoothly when she tested them. She opened the wardrobe. Evening gowns, all black, all her size, which meant they'd researched her, measured her somehow. The fabrics were exquisite, silk, velvet, materials that whispered against her fingers. Shoes to match. Undergarments. Everything she might need, all in shades of midnight. Morning clothes, Lillian thought, or uniforms. She sat at the desk and looked out at Manhattan. From this height, the city looked manageable, organized. She could see people moving on the sidewalks below, small as ants, living lives that didn't include being sold to crime lords. The hours crawled. She found books on a shelf, classics mostly. Austen, Dickens, the Brontes. Someone had good taste, or at least expensive taste. She tried to read, but the words wouldn't stick. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. What does he want? At 7:30, she bathed in the enormous bathroom with its clawfoot tub and gold fixtures. She dried herself with towels softer than anything she'd ever owned. She looked at herself in the mirror, still the same Lillian. Brown hair, average face, body that worked for everything except the one thing her ex-husband had wanted from it. Unremarkable. Forgettable. Defective. She chose a gown from the wardrobe, black silk that fell to her ankles, sleeveless, with a neckline that wasn't immodest but wasn't modest either. It fit perfectly. The shoes were simple heels, surprisingly comfortable. She left her hair down because she had no pins to put it up. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lock clicked. Mrs. Castellane entered without knocking. You'll do, she said, looking Lillian over. Come. They descended stairs Lillian hadn't seen, a servant's passage, narrow and plain, down 3 flights to a level below the main floor. A basement, perhaps, though it didn't feel subterranean. The walls were paneled in dark wood. Sconces provided soft light. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and old books. Mrs. Castellane stopped before an ornate door and knocked twice. Enter. The voice from within was deep, controlled. The voice from her father's apartment, she realized, the smooth one that had negotiated her sale. Mrs. Castellane opened the door and gestured. Lillian walked through. The room was a study, but unlike any she'd imagined. 2 stories high, lined floor to ceiling with books, a fireplace large enough to stand in, furniture that looked both antique and comfortable, and at the far end, behind a massive desk, sitting in shadow despite the lamps burning throughout the room, a figure. She could make out his outline, broad shoulders, dark suit, but his face remained in darkness, positioned deliberately so that the light never quite reached him. Miss Hart. That voice again. Welcome. Lillian stood still, waiting. My name is Victor DeLuca. You've been informed of your purpose here? No, Lillian said. I've been informed I'm payment for my father's debt. The purpose was never specified. A pause. Then something that might have been a laugh. Honest? How refreshing. Very well. Your purpose, Miss Hart, is simple. You will come to this room every evening at 8 o'clock. You will sit in that chair. He gestured to a high-backed chair positioned near the fireplace. And you will tell me stories. Lillian blinked. Stories. Stories, tales, narratives, whatever you wish to call them. I understand you read extensively. You will have access to this library. You may draw from it, from memory, from imagination. I don't care about the source. I care about the quality. For how long? Each evening, for 3 hours. You may leave at 11. I mean, how long will I be required to do this? Until I decide otherwise. He shifted in his chair, still keeping to shadow. Your father's debt is considerable. This arrangement forgives it entirely, provided you fulfill your obligations. Attempt to leave, refuse to comply, or prove inadequate to the task. The debt returns. With interest. Do you understand? Lillian understood perfectly. She was collateral, renewable or disposable depending on performance. I understand, she said. Good. Then begin. She stared at the shadow. Now? Why not? Sit, Miss Hart. Tell me a story. Lillian crossed to the chair. It was positioned so she faced the fireplace, the desk at an angle. She could see a silhouette but no details. By design, clearly. He wanted to watch her while remaining hidden. She sat. The chair was comfortable, upholstered in burgundy velvet. A small table beside it held a glass of water. The fire crackled softly. Tell me a story. Lillian's mind raced. What did you tell a crime lord in the dark? What story would satisfy a man who'd bought a woman just to listen to her speak? Once, she began, her voice steadier than she felt, there was a king who conquered everything he touched. Cities fell before him. Armies surrendered at his approach. His enemies whispered his name in fear, and his allies prostrated themselves in supplication. She paused. The shadow didn't move, but she sensed attention. Focused. Intent. But the king had a problem, Lillian continued. Everything he touched turned to gold. Literally. His food, his wine, his furniture, all gold. Beautiful. Valuable. Useless. He was the wealthiest man in the world and the most starving. He sat on a golden throne in a golden palace, surrounded by golden treasures, slowly dying of hunger and thirst. King Midas, the shadow said, you're reciting myths. You asked for a story. You didn't specify originality. Another pause, then, continue. Lillian continued, but she changed the telling, added details, made it visceral, described the king's desperation, the way golden bread crumbled to dust between his teeth, the cold of gold against his skin, the loneliness of being surrounded by treasure but unable to touch another living thing. She talked for 20 minutes, elaborating, embellishing, making the familiar myth into something immediate and aching. When she finished, silence filled the room. Again, the shadow said, different story. So she told another, then another, tales from books, from memory, from pieces of her imagination that had lain dormant for years. She talked until her throat was dry, until the water glass was empty, until the clock chimed 11. Stop. The command was absolute. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Do not be late. Dismissed. Lillian stood, her legs stiff from sitting. She walked to the door. Miss Hart. She turned. The shadow leaned forward slightly, and for just a moment lamplight caught his eyes. Gold. Burnished gold like coins in firelight. Then he shifted back, disappearing into darkness again. You'll do, he said, echoing Mrs. Castellane's words, but his tone was different, almost satisfied. Lillian left, climbed back to her room, locked herself inside her beautiful prison, sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what had just happened. She'd been bought to tell stories to a man who hid in shadows, a man with golden eyes who listened with an intensity that felt almost hungry, a man who clearly wanted something from her words but wouldn't or couldn't explain what. The daughter nobody wanted, telling tales to a monster in the dark. Lillian laughed once, sharp and bitter. Then she laid back on her expensive bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came. The pattern established itself quickly. Days were hers. She woke when she wanted, ate meals brought by silent staff, read from the library that proved to contain thousands of volumes. No one bothered her. No one spoke to her except Mrs. Castelaine, who came once daily to ensure Lillian had everything required. You're satisfactory, she said at the end of the first week, the highest praise she seemed capable of. Evenings belonged to Victor De Luca. Every night at 8, Lillian descended to the study. Every night she sat in the velvet chair. Every night she spoke for 3 hours while a shadow listened. He never showed himself fully, never moved into light, but he was there, constant and focused, drinking in her words. She told fairy tales with teeth, Gothic romances where the monsters were sympathetic, historical accounts made visceral. She drew from everything she'd ever read, every story that had kept her company during lonely years. And slowly, carefully, she began to add her own tales. Small ones at first: a girl in a tower, a wolf who learned to speak, a merchant who sold more than goods, testing to see if he'd reject original content. He didn't. If anything, he seemed to prefer it. "Where did that come from?" he asked one night, after she'd finished a particularly dark story about a queen who ate hearts to stay young. "My imagination," Lillian said. "Tell me another. Original. Nothing borrowed." So she did. And the night after. And the one following. In the third week, something changed. She was midway through a story about a prince cursed to live in two forms when the shadow spoke, interrupting for the first time. "Why does he hide?" Victor asked. "The prince. Why doesn't he reveal himself?" Lillian paused. "Because he's ashamed. He thinks the curse makes him monstrous. Is he wrong? Does it matter? Shame exists whether it's justified or not." Silence. Then, "Continue." But the question lingered. Why does he hide? She looked at the shadow that never moved into light, the man who orchestrated her purchase but wouldn't let her see his face. That night, when she returned to her room, she found something new on her desk. A leather-bound journal, expensive paper, no note. But the message was clear. Write. She did. Started composing stories during the day, refining them, building narratives with more complexity. Characters who lived in her head during daylight hours and came alive in firelight at night. The fourth week, she took a risk. "I want to tell you a different kind of story tonight," she said as she sat down. "Proceed." "It's about a girl who was sold." The shadow went very still. "She wasn't valuable," Lillian continued, her voice steady. "She couldn't give anyone what they wanted. So when her family needed money, they traded her. Not to a king or a merchant or a knight, to a shadow. A voice in the dark that wanted only one thing, to hear her speak. Miss Hart. She was afraid at first. Terrified, actually. But fear fades when nothing terrible happens. And gradually, she became curious. Why would a shadow buy a girl just to listen to her stories? What could a voice in darkness possibly want that violence couldn't take? She let the question hang. What did she decide? Victor's voice was different now, rougher. She decided that maybe loneliness wears many faces, and maybe the most isolated people are the ones surrounded by everything except understanding. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, the shadow didn't move. "Finish the story," he said finally. "I don't know the ending yet," Lillian admitted. "It's still being written." When she left that night, she thought she heard something behind her, a sound almost like a sigh. The fifth week brought the first genuine conversation. "Do you resent being here, Victor asked without preamble as she settled into her chair. Lillian considered lying, decided against it. "Yes." "Why continue then?" "Because my compliance protects people I care about, and because—" She hesitated. "Because I have nowhere else to go. My family made it clear I'm not wanted there. My ex-husband remarried a woman who's already pregnant. This," she gestured at the elegant room, "is the only place I have value." "Value." He repeated the word like it tasted strange. "Is that how you see yourself? As valuable only when useful to others? Isn't that how everyone sees me?" "I don't." The simple statement hung between them. "Then how do you see me?" Lillian asked. Long silence, then, as someone who understands what it's like to be divided, to have one face for the world and another for the darkness. Before she could respond, he continued, "Tell me about your marriage. Why did it end?" "Personal. Too personal. But refusal wasn't really an option." "I couldn't give him children," Lillian said quietly. "We tried for 5 years, tests, treatments, specialists. Everything failed. He wanted an heir. I couldn't provide one, so he found someone who could." "And you believe that makes you defective, don't you? Isn't that why I'm here instead of my sister? Because I'm the daughter who failed at the one thing women are supposed to succeed at." "You're here," Victor said, his voice like gravel. "Because your sister is ordinary. Beautiful, perhaps, but ordinary. You have something she lacks." "What?" "Depth, darkness, the ability to see monsters and not flinch." Lillian's breath caught. "I haven't seen you. You won't allow it." "Haven't you?" The shadow shifted. "You've been looking at me every night for 5 weeks, Miss Hart. You just haven't been using your eyes." That night, she lay awake for hours, turning his words over in her mind. You've been looking at me. Through her stories, he meant. Through the tales she told, the characters she created, the darkness she wasn't afraid to explore. She was seeing him, and he was seeing her. The recognition was terrifying and exhilarating. The 6th week, everything shifted. She entered the study to find it transformed. The desk had been moved, the chair repositioned, and in the center of the room, beneath the chandelier, stood a small table set for dinner. 2 places. Real food, not the untouched feasts that sometimes appeared. Simple, elegant, candles burning. Sit, Victor said. Still in shadow, but closer now. She could make out more of his form, the breadth of him, the way he moved with controlled grace. I don't understand. You will tell stories while we eat. I'm tired of watching you speak to air. Conversation requires presence. Lillian sat. A moment later, movement in her peripheral vision. He took the other chair but positioned so that candlelight fell on her while he remained in relative darkness. Clever. She could see his hands now, large, scarred across the knuckles, surprisingly elegant, the edge of a strong jaw. But his face remained shadowed. Eat, he commanded. She did. Roasted chicken, vegetables that actually tasted fresh, bread that was still warm. Real food for the first time in weeks. She hadn't realized how hungry she'd been. Now, Victor said, tell me a story where the monster wins. Lillian looked up, fork halfway to her mouth. Wins? Everyone roots for the hero. Give me a tale where the monster is triumphant, where darkness doesn't yield to light, where the curse remains unbroken. It was a test. She recognized it immediately. He wanted to know if she could accept darkness as an ending, if she required redemption in her narratives. Very well, she said. And she told him a story about a beast who ruled a forest, who was cursed to remain monstrous forever, who learned to find contentment in his isolation, who stopped waiting for transformation and instead built a life within his limitations. When she finished, Victor was silent for a long moment. You don't believe in happy endings, he said finally. I believe in honest ones, sometimes happy, sometimes not, but always true to the characters. And what would be a true ending for you, Miss Hart? The question was too intimate, too revealing, but he'd asked, and somehow refusing felt worse than answering. One where I matter to someone, Lillian said quietly. Not because I'm useful, not because I can give them something they want, just because I exist, because my presence has value beyond function. She looked at his shadow, wishing she could see his face. What would be yours? I don't believe in endings, Victor said. Only perpetual middles, states that persist until death intervenes. That's bleak. That's honest. They ate in silence for a while. Then Victor spoke again, his voice different, softer. My turn, he said. Your turn? To tell you a story. Lillian set down her fork, listening. Once, Victor began, there was a boy who was born wrong. Not obviously, he looked normal enough. But inside, something was broken, fractured. He had appetites that others didn't, impulses that frightened him. By the time he was 12, he knew he was dangerous. Lillian held very still. He learned to hide it, built walls, created personas. The world saw what he wanted them to see: power, control, ruthlessness when necessary. But inside, he was always fighting, always aware that one moment of weakness, one loss of control, and he'd become exactly what he feared. What did he fear? Lillian whispered. Becoming a monster. Victor's hands clenched on the table. Not metaphorically, literally, he had condition. Genetic, rare, and completely uncontrollable. What kind of condition? The kind that means he can never fully trust himself. Never let anyone too close. Never allow himself the luxury of vulnerability, because vulnerability means loss of control, and loss of control means... He stopped abruptly. It doesn't matter. The point is, some curses don't break. Some monsters stay monsters. Lillian absorbed this. Is that why you hide? Why I've never seen your face? I hide because revelation is dangerous, for both of us. I'm not afraid. You should be. The vehemence startled her. Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. For a moment, he stood in the light, and Lillian caught a glimpse. Strong features, a scar along his jaw, those extraordinary gold eyes burning with something fierce and desperate. Then he stepped back into shadow. "Enough," he said. "Tomorrow, 8 o'clock." Dismissed. But everything had changed. As Lillian climbed back to her room, she realized she wasn't afraid. She should be. He'd all but admitted to being dangerous, unstable, cursed with something he could barely control. But all she felt was recognition. Because she understood what it meant to be broken, to feel fundamentally wrong, to build walls between yourself and the world because letting people in meant letting them see your defects. They were the same, she and her shadow, both bought by circumstance, both hiding in different ways, both desperately, terribly alone. The 7th week began with blood. Lillian woke to shouting in the hallway outside her room, male voices, urgent and harsh. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, as footsteps thundered past her door. Then silence, heavy and complete. She waited, but no one came to explain. No one knocked. The house settled back into its usual quiet, but underneath it now, Lillian sensed something new. Tension, the kind that preceded storms. At 8 o'clock, she descended to the study as always. The door was ajar. She pushed it open and stopped. Victor stood by the fireplace, his back to her. For the first time in 7 weeks, he was in full light. Tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a white shirt that was stained dark across the left side. Blood. Fresh enough that she could smell the copper tang of it. "Mr. DeLuca." "Sit." His voice was rougher than usual, strained. "You're injured." I said sit. Not a request. A command edged with something dangerous. Lillian moved to her chair but didn't sit. "You need medical attention." "What I need," Victor said, still not turning, "is for you to do what you're paid to do. Tell me a story, Miss Hart. Make me forget." His hand gripped the mantel, knuckles white. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself too still. Fighting something, pain maybe, or something worse. "I can't tell stories while you're bleeding," Lillian said quietly. "You can, and you will." "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. "Not like this." Victor turned then, and Lillian finally saw his face fully. She'd caught glimpses before. The strong jaw, the scar, but never the complete picture. He was younger than she'd imagined, mid-30s perhaps, handsome in a brutal way with sharp features that suggested aristocratic bloodlines and hard living. His eyes were gold, just as she'd seen in glimpses, but there was something else in them now. Something wild. "You're refusing?" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm being practical. You're hurt. Let me help." "I don't need help from you." But even as he said it, he swayed slightly. His hand went to his side, pressing against the bloodstain. Lillian made a decision. She crossed to him quickly before he could retreat into shadow again. Up close, she could see the wound, a deep gash along his ribs, probably from a knife. The blood was still seeping through his fingers. "Sit down," she said firmly. "Now." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Or worse. His eyes blazed with that strange, wild light, and she could feel the violence radiating from him like heat. But then, surprisingly, he sank into a nearby chair. "There's a medical kit," he said through gritted teeth. "Cabinet behind the desk." Lillian found it. A comprehensive kit that suggested injuries were not uncommon in this household. She brought it to him, then knelt beside his chair. "I need to see the wound." Victor's jaw clenched, but he unbuttoned his shirt. The gash was worse than she'd thought, 6 inches long, deep enough to need stitches. The edges were ragged. "What happened?" she asked as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic. "Business." "Business that involves knives?" "My business always involves knives, or guns, or fists," he hissed as she pressed gauze to the wound. "I run a criminal empire, Miss Hart. Violence is the currency." "You need stitches." "Then stitch me." Lillian looked up at him. "I'm not a doctor." "But you can sew. I've seen the mending you've done on your clothes." Those gold eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. "Consider it part of your service." Her hands trembled as she threaded the needle from the kit. She'd sewn fabric, yes, never flesh, but Victor was watching her with a strange expression, almost challenging, daring her to flinch, to prove herself too delicate for his world. "This will hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts." He leaned back, exposing the wound fully. "Do it." She did. Pressed the needle through skin, pulled thread tight, tried not to think about the fact that she was sewing a man's body closed. Victor didn't make a sound, didn't flinch, just watched her face with those unnerving eyes. "You're not afraid," he observed. "I'm terrified." Lillian focused on keeping her stitches even. "I'm just good at hiding it." Like recognizes like. She finished the last stitch and tied it off. The wound was closed, if not pretty. She applied antibiotic ointment and began wrapping his torso with gauze. "You're good at this," Victor said. His voice had changed, softer, almost wondering. "My mother has Parkinson's. I learned basic medical care." Lillian secured the bandage. "Though I've never treated a knife wound before." First time for everything. He caught her wrist as she started to pull away. "Thank you." The touch startled her. His hand was warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle despite the strength she could feel in it. She looked up and found him closer than she'd realized. Close enough that she could see flecks of amber in those gold eyes. Close enough to smell blood and cologne and something else. Something almost wild. "You should rest," Lillian said, suddenly aware of how intimate this position was. Her kneeling before him, his hand on her wrist, the space between them charged with something she couldn't name. "I should." But he didn't release her. "Why did you help me?" "Because you needed help." That's not usually sufficient reason. Most people in your position would have let me bleed, hoped I'd die, seen it as an opportunity for escape. I'm not most people. No. His thumb brushed against her pulse point. You're not. The moment stretched. Then Victor released her abruptly and stood, moving carefully to avoid pulling his stitches. "I need to tell you something, Miss Hart, about what you witnessed earlier." Lillian stood as well, putting distance between them. "The shouting?" "A rival organization tried to kill me tonight. They failed, but it won't be the last attempt." He moved to the window, looking out at Manhattan's glittering lights. "This house is the safest place in the city for me, but that doesn't mean it's completely secure. If something happens, if men come here, if there's violence, you lock yourself in your room and you don't come out until Mrs. Castellane gets you. Understood? You think they'll come here? I think power attracts enemies, and I've made more enemies than most." He turned back to her. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the reality of your situation. You're in the home of a man that half of Manhattan wants dead. That makes you a potential target by proximity." Lillian absorbed this. "Are you offering to let me leave?" "No." The word was absolute. "Your father's debt still stands, but I'm giving you information so you can protect yourself if necessary." How considerate. The sarcasm slipped out before she could stop it. Victor's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "You're angry." "I've been bought, imprisoned, and now informed I might be collateral damage in a gang war. Yes, I'm angry." "Good." He moved closer. "Anger is honest. I prefer it to the fear you're so good at hiding." "What do you want from me?" The question burst out raw and frustrated. "Really want? Because none of this makes sense. You could have hired someone to read to you. You could have paid for companionship that doesn't require kidnapping. So what is this? What am I actually here for?" Victor studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, dangerously honest. "You're here because I'm losing control." Lillian went still. "I told you I have a condition," Victor continued. "I didn't tell you what it means. Every full moon, my body changes. Transforms into something that isn't quite human. It's genetic. My grandfather had it, my father had it, now I have it. And it's getting worse." "Worse how?" "The transformations are lasting longer, happening more frequently. I used to have weeks between episodes. Now it's days." His hands clenched into fists. "And when I change, I lose myself, become something violent and mindless, something that would kill without hesitation or remorse." Lillian's mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Transformations, changes. It sounded impossible, but the intensity in Victor's eyes, the barely controlled fear beneath his words, he believed it, completely. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked carefully. "Your voice." Victor's jaw tightened. "When you speak, when you tell your stories, it anchors me, pulls me back from the edge. I don't know why. I don't understand it. But for 3 hours every night, When I'm listening to you, I feel human, clear, like the beast inside me goes quiet. Understanding crashed over her. That's why you bought me. Not for entertainment, for survival. I bought you because I'm desperate. The admission seemed to cost him, because I've tried everything else, medication, meditation, isolation, restraints, and nothing works. But then I heard you. Heard your voice on a recording your father provided as proof of your suitability, and something in it called to the part of me that's still human. My father recorded me? The betrayal stung, even though it shouldn't surprise her. Without your knowledge, apparently, you were reading to your mother a fairy tale. Victor's expression was unreadable. You made it beautiful, transformed something simple into something transcendent, and I thought, if her voice can do that to a story, maybe it can do something to me. Lillian sat down slowly. This was so much worse than she'd imagined. She wasn't just property. She was medicine, a treatment for something that sounded like madness. You said it's getting worse, she said finally. How much worse? The next full moon is in 3 days. The transformation will last longer than usual, possibly the entire night. Victor's voice was flat, controlled. I'll be locked in the sub-basement, restrained, but I'll still be conscious, still aware. And the beast will be fighting to get out the entire time. What happens if it does get out? People die. Simple. Absolute. That's why I need you to be prepared. The night of the full moon, you stay in your room no matter what you hear, no matter what sounds come from below. You don't investigate. You don't try to help. You just wait until morning. And if morning doesn't come? Victor met her eyes. Then Mrs. Castellane will get you out. She has instructions. They looked at each other across the study. Monster and captive. Curse and cure. The absurdity of it struck Lillian suddenly. She'd gone from being worthless to being vital, from defective daughter to the one thing keeping a crime lord human. I need you to understand something, Victor said. What I'm telling you is dangerous knowledge. No one outside my inner circle knows about my condition. If it became public, I'd lose everything. My enemies would use it against me. My allies would abandon me. The entire empire I've built would collapse. You're trusting me not to tell anyone. I'm trusting that you're intelligent enough to realize your survival is tied to mine. If I fall, you fall with me. He paused. But yes, against all logic and self-preservation, I'm trusting you. The weight of that trust settled on Lillian's shoulders. She thought about her options. She could betray him, somehow get word out about his condition, use it as leverage for her freedom. She could run, though he'd made it clear that would mean her father's debt returning with consequences she could only imagine. Or she could stay, continue being the voice in the darkness that kept monsters at bay. Tell me about the transformation, she said instead of answering directly. What does it feel like? Victor looked surprised, then resigned. He moved back to his chair, settling into it carefully to protect his injury. It starts with fever, he said, like my blood is boiling. Then the bones begin to shift. It's not like in movies, quick and dramatic. It's slow, agonizing, every bone breaking and reforming, every muscle tearing and rebuilding. It takes hours, and I'm conscious for all of it. Lillian listened, horror and fascination warring inside her. When it's complete, I'm something else, larger, stronger, faster, with senses that can track prey from miles away. And the hunger? He stopped, closing his eyes. The hunger is the worst part. Not for food, for violence, for blood. The beast wants to hunt, to kill, to establish dominance through destruction. But you fight it. I lose every time. The admission was raw. Eventually. The restraints hold barely. But inside I'm gone. There's nothing human left until the sun rises and the transformation reverses. 3 days, Lillian said quietly. You have 3 days of being yourself before the beast takes over. Yes, then we should make the most of them. Victor opened his eyes. What? You hired me to tell stories, to keep you anchored, so let me do my job. Lillian stood, moving back to her usual chair by the fire. Properly this time. No more hiding in shadows. No more pretending this is just employment. You need help, Mr. DeLuca. Let me help. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or fear. I don't know how to be vulnerable, he said. Neither do I. But I'm learning. She settled into her chair and looked at him directly. So sit in the light. Let me see you. And I'll tell you a story about what it means to be human even when you're not sure you deserve to be. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly he moved his chair into the firelight, sat down where she could see him fully. His face was tense, guarded, but he didn't retreat. "All right, Miss Hart," he said quietly. "Make me human." So she did. She told him a story about a prince who was cursed to become a beast, but instead of waiting for true love's kiss to break the spell, he learned to accept both halves of himself. Learned that transformation didn't mean losing humanity, it meant expanding it to include the parts he'd been taught to hate. Victor listened with that intense focus she'd come to recognize, but now she could see his face, watch the emotions play across it. Pain when she described the prince's isolation. Recognition when she talked about fighting against your own nature. Something close to longing when she spoke about acceptance. When she finished, the clock showed 11, but neither of them moved. "Same story tomorrow?" Victor asked. "Different story, same theme." "Why this theme?" "Because," Lillian said carefully, "I think you've spent so long fighting what you are that you've forgotten. You're more than just a curse. You're a man who runs an empire, who employs hundreds of people, who just warned me about danger instead of using me as bait. Those things matter, Mr. DeLuca. They make you human, regardless of what happens during full moons. You're trying to redeem me." His voice held dark amusement. "I'm trying to remind you that redemption and damnation aren't the only options. Sometimes survival is enough." Victor stood carefully, testing his stitches. "You're wasted as a reader, Miss Hart. You should have been a philosopher." "Philosophers don't pay debts." "No, they don't." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The next 3 days, I'll be available during daylight hours as well. If you want to leave your room, explore the house, you have permission. Mrs. Castellane will show you what areas are accessible." "Why?" "Because locking you away seems suddenly cruel." He met her eyes. "And because if I only have 3 days before I lose myself, I'd like to spend them with someone who sees me as more than a monster." He left before she could respond. Lillian sat in the silent study, her heart racing. Something had shifted tonight. She'd stopped being just a voice in the dark and become something else, something more dangerous. She'd become someone Victor DeLuca trusted, someone he needed, someone he wanted to be human for. And despite everything, the captivity, the danger, the impossibility of the situation, she found herself wanting to help him. Not because she had to, because somewhere in the last 7 weeks, the monster in the shadows had become a man. Complicated, damaged, terrifying, but human. Achingly, desperately human. The next morning, Mrs. Castellane appeared at Lillian's door with an expression that might have been approval. "Mr. DeLuca has extended your privileges," she said. "You may move freely through the house. The 4th, 3rd, and 2nd floors are accessible. The 1st floor during the day only. The basement levels remain restricted." "He told me about the full moon," Lillian said. Mrs. Castellane's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Did he? That's unprecedented. How long have you known?" 20 years. I was his nurse when he was 16 and experienced his first transformation. I've been managing his household ever since." She studied Lillian with new interest. "He trusts you. That's either very wise or catastrophically foolish. Which do you think it is?" "I think," Mrs. Castellane said slowly, "that Victor DeLuca has spent his entire adult life isolating himself from anything that might make him vulnerable. The fact that he's chosen to trust you suggests he's either found something worth the risk, or he's more desperate than I realized." "Both, probably," Lillian said. "Probably." Mrs. Castellane almost smiled. "Come, I'll show you the library on the 3rd floor. It's more extensive than the one in the study." The library was spectacular. 2 stories of books connected by a spiral staircase, with reading nooks tucked into alcoves and windows that overlooked Central Park. Lillian felt something in her chest expand with pure longing. "Mr. DeLuca's grandfather collected first editions," Mrs. Castellane explained. "His father added contemporary works. Victor himself prefers philosophy and history. You're welcome to read anything here." "This is incredible," Lillian breathed, running her fingers along leather spines. Books were his refuge as a child, before he learned what he was. Mrs. Castellane's voice held an unexpected gentleness. "He'd hide here during his father's rages, read for hours. I think they saved him, in a way. Reminded him that humans could be more than violent." Lillian pulled down a volume, Dante's Inferno, illustrated edition. His father was violent? His father was a monster in every sense of the word, transformed or not. Mrs. Castellane's mouth thinned. He taught Victor that power came from fear, that showing weakness meant death, that the curse made them superior, not afflicted. But Victor doesn't believe that. No, he learned differently, painfully. She moved toward the door. Lunch will be brought to you here if you'd like. Mr. DeLuca usually works in his office during the day, but he's requested dinner together this evening. 7 o'clock, the dining room on the second floor. After she left, Lillian explored the library, found sections on mythology, folklore, medical texts, an entire wall dedicated to curse literature, fairy tales, legends, clinical studies of genetic conditions. Victor's attempt to understand himself through every lens available. She selected an armful of books and settled into a window seat. The park spread out below, people moving through it like pieces on a chessboard. Free. Ordinary. Living lives that didn't include cursed crime lords and impossible transformations. But Lillian found she didn't envy them. Their freedom came with its own prisons, jobs they hated, relationships that suffocated them, the endless grind of normal existence. At least her cage was beautiful. At least her captor was honest about what he was. At least she mattered here. The thought should have disturbed her. Instead, it settled into her chest like warmth. Dinner that evening was different from their previous shared meal. The dining room was formal. Mahogany table, crystal chandelier, paintings of stern ancestors watching from the walls. But the setting was intimate. 2 places close together. Wine already poured. Candles lit despite the chandelier. Victor stood when she entered. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, black to match his usual aesthetic. The bandage was hidden, but she could see slight stiffness in how he moved. Miss Hart. He pulled out her chair. Mr. DeLuca. She sat, hyper-aware of his proximity. I thought we might dispense with formality, he said, taking his own seat. Given that you've literally held my insides together, call me Victor. Then I'm Lillian. Lillian. He said her name like he was tasting it. It suits you. Literary. Classic. With hidden depths. My mother named me after Lillian Hellman, the playwright. Appropriate. Hellman wrote about moral complexity, the spaces between right and wrong. Victor lifted his wine glass. To moral complexity. Lillian touched her glass to his. The wine was excellent, rich and smooth. The food that followed was equally impressive. Courses that suggested Victor employed a talented chef. Tell me about your life before, Victor said as they ate. Before your marriage? Before your father's debt? Who were you? No one had asked her that in years. Lillian set down her fork, considering. I was a girl who read too much and talked too little. I loved stories more than people because stories made sense. They had structure. Beginning, middle, end, meaning. She smiled slightly. People disappointed me. Stories never did. When did that change? It hasn't. I still prefer narratives to relationships. She met his eyes. Present company excluded, apparently. Why excluded? Because you're honest. You told me exactly what you are, what you need, what you're afraid of. That's more than most people manage in a lifetime. Victor was quiet for a moment. My honesty is strategic. If you know what I am, you can't be hurt by discovering it later. That's still more honest than pretending. Perhaps. He refilled her wine. Your marriage, was it ever good? For about 6 months. Then we started trying for children and it became a job. Clinical, scheduled. All the romance died under the weight of thermometers and ovulation calendars. Lillian took a long drink. He wanted an heir for his family business. I wanted to feel useful. Neither of us got what we wanted. Did you love him? I thought I did. Looking back, I think I loved the idea of being chosen, of mattering to someone. She laughed bitterly. Turns out being chosen isn't the same as being valued. No, Victor agreed. It's not. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're different than you were 7 weeks ago. How so? Less afraid. More present. The first night you looked like you wanted to disappear. Now you look like you're claiming space. Lillian considered this. He was right. Somewhere between being sold and being trusted, she'd stopped apologizing for existing. Your influence, she said, You treat me like I have value beyond my functionality. You do. Why? The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. What do you see in me that my family couldn't? Victor's expression softened. I see someone who survived being unwanted and came out stronger. Someone who tells stories that make monsters feel human. Someone brave enough to stitch up a bleeding crime lord without flinching. He paused. I see someone worth knowing, Lillian, even if the knowing is temporary. The words hit harder than she expected. She looked down at her plate, blinking against sudden heat in her eyes. 3 days isn't long, she said quietly. No, but it's what we have. They finished dinner in companionable silence. Then Victor stood, offering his hand. Come, I want to show you something. She let him lead her through the house, up to the 5th floor she hadn't yet seen. He opened a door onto a rooftop garden, an impossible oasis in the middle of Manhattan. Trees and massive planters, flowering vines, a small fountain. The city sprawled around them, close enough to touch, far enough to feel separate. I come here when I need to remember I'm part of the world, Victor said, that I'm not just the beast in the basement. Lillian walked to the edge, looking out at the glittering skyline. It's beautiful. Yes, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. She turned, found him closer than expected. The moonlight, not quite full, not yet dangerous, cast his features in silver, made him look almost ethereal despite the brutality of his build. Lillian, his voice was rough. I need to tell you something before the full moon, in case I don't survive it. Don't listen. He caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. The transformation is getting harder to survive. My body can't take much more. Eventually, it will kill me or I'll lose myself completely. Either way, I'm running out of time. Then we'll find a solution. Medical treatment, research. I've tried everything. There is no cure. He squeezed her hand gently. But I want you to know that these weeks with you, they've been the most human I've felt in years. Your stories, your presence, your refusal to be intimidated by what I am. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What? Hope. The word was barely a whisper. Hope that maybe I'm more than just a curse, that maybe some part of me is worth saving. Lillian's throat tightened. You are worth saving, Victor. All of you, beast and man. I wish I believed that. Then believe me when I say it. They stood in the moonlight, hands clasped, the city breathing around them. Tomorrow would bring preparations for the full moon. The day after, containment and restraints. The night after that, transformation and violence. But tonight, in this stolen moment of peace, Victor DeLuca was just a man, and Lillian Hart was just a woman. And between them hummed something neither could name but both recognized, something that felt dangerously close to hope, or maybe something even more dangerous, something that felt like belonging. The next morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring that made New Yorkers shed their coats prematurely. Lillian woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the distant sound of traffic. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality settled back in. The mansion, the curse, the impossible intimacy of the previous night. She dressed and found breakfast waiting in her sitting room. Real breakfast now, not just the perfunctory trays from before. Fresh fruit, pastries still warm, coffee that smelled like it had been ground moments ago. A note in heavy script rested beside the coffee pot. Join me in the garden at noon if you're inclined. There's something I'd like to discuss. V. The informality of it struck her. Not Mr. DeLuca. Not a summons through Mrs. Castellane. Just Victor, asking rather than commanding. She spent the morning in the library, ostensibly reading but mostly watching the clock. At 11:45, she changed into one of the few day dresses she'd found in her wardrobe. Deep green, simple but well made. She braided her hair, then unbraided it, suddenly self-conscious in a way she hadn't been since her first dates as a teenager. Victor was waiting in the rooftop garden when she arrived, sitting on a bench beneath a flowering cherry tree that had no business blooming in February. He'd shed his usual severe black for dark gray, looking almost relaxed. Almost. The tension never fully left his shoulders. You came, he said, standing. You asked. I did. He gestured to the bench. Sit with me? They sat beneath the impossible cherry blossoms, and for a moment neither spoke. The city hummed below them, but up here felt removed, protected. A pocket of quiet in the chaos. Tomorrow night is the full moon, Victor said finally. I've given Mrs. Castellane instructions for your safety. The sub-basement will be sealed. No one goes down there for any reason. If something goes wrong, if the restraints fail, there's a panic room on the 3rd floor. She'll get you there. Nothing will go wrong. You can't know that. He turned to face her. Lillian, I need you to understand. When I transform, I'm not me anymore. I won't recognize you, won't remember our conversations or your stories or anything human. If the beast gets free and finds you, it will kill you without hesitation. Oh, then we'll make sure it doesn't get free. Listen to me. No, you listen. Lillian surprised herself with her vehemence. I've spent my entire life being discarded by people who decided I wasn't worth the trouble. My husband, my father, my sister. They all chose to let me go rather than fight for me. But you? You're fighting every day to stay human despite a curse you didn't ask for, so don't tell me to give up on you before the battle even starts. Victor stared at her. You're remarkable. I'm stubborn. That too. His mouth curved slightly. I wanted to discuss something else. About after. After the full moon? After everything. If I survive tomorrow night, there will be another full moon in 28 days, and another after that. This is my life, Lillian. An endless cycle of losing myself and clawing my way back to humanity. It's no life to offer anyone. Understanding dawned. You're trying to let me go. I'm trying to give you a choice. Your father's debt. I'll forgive it regardless. You've more than fulfilled your obligation. You can leave. Go anywhere you want. I'll provide funds to help you start over. A new city, new life. Freedom. Lillian's chest tightened. And if I don't want to leave? Why would you stay? Victor's voice was raw. I bought you, imprisoned you, put you in danger just by bringing you into my world. Any rational person would run. I stopped being rational the night I stitched you back together. She met his eyes directly. I'm not staying out of obligation, Victor. I'm staying because I choose to, because your stories matter to me now as much as mine matter to you. You barely know me. I know you're afraid of becoming your father. I know you hide first editions in your library and read philosophy at 3 a.m. I know you pay your household staff triple the market rate and personally vet every security hire to ensure they're not violent criminals. I know you... She stopped, the words too large for her throat. What? Victor prompted softly. I know you make me feel valuable for the first time in my life. The confession hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Victor reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. I don't deserve you, he said. Probably not. But I'm not particularly deserving either, so we're even. He laughed, actual laughter, surprised and genuine. Then his expression sobered. If you stay, there are things you need to know. About my world, my business. It's not just the curse that makes me dangerous. Tell me. So he did. Spoke about the criminal empire his grandfather had built and his father had expanded through brutality. How Victor had inherited it at 23 when his father finally succumbed to the curse. How he'd spent the last 12 years trying to transform it from the inside, reducing violence, refusing certain ventures, attempting to build something that didn't rely purely on fear. It's slow work, he said, and it makes me enemies. The old guard thinks I'm weak. They're waiting for me to fail, to prove that mercy is incompatible with power. The assassination attempt the other night, that was one of my own capos. A message that traditional methods are preferable to my approach. What happened to him? Lillian asked. He's being dealt with. Victor's voice went flat. I'm not a good man, Lillian. I can't afford to be. Mercy has limits in my world. I'm not asking you to be good. I'm asking you to be honest. Then honestly, staying with me means danger. It means living with the knowledge that violence is always a possibility. It means being associated with a man that most of society considers a monster. Most of society has never had dinner with you. Is that your criterion for judgment? Table manners? My criterion is whether someone treats me like a person or a problem. You're the first man in years who's managed the former. Lillian stood, restless suddenly. Besides, your world can't be worse than being invisible in my own family. At least here, I matter. Victor rose as well, capturing her hand. You matter too much. That's what terrifies me. Before she could respond, the rooftop door burst open. A man appeared, mid-40s, built like a boxer, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He stopped short at seeing Lillian. Boss, we have a problem. Victor's entire demeanor changed. The gentleness vanished, replaced by cold authority. What kind of problem, Marcus? The Volkov Bratva. They're demanding a meeting. Tonight. I'm not available tonight. They know about tomorrow. About the moon. Marcus's eyes flicked to Lillian. Should we? She knows. Victor's tone brooked no argument. What do the Russians want? Alliance. Or war. They're giving you until midnight to decide. Victor's jaw clenched. Lillian could see him calculating, weighing options. Where? The plaza. Ballroom level. 8 o'clock. That's public. Exposed. That's the point. They're calling your bluff. Saying if you're strong enough to lead, prove it in front of witnesses. Lillian watched Victor's face harden into something she hadn't seen before. This was DeLuca, the crime lord. The man who'd consolidated 5 families through strategy and force. The beast in a suit. Fine. Arrange security, full detail, and get Castellane. I want the house locked down while I'm gone. He turned to Lillian. You'll stay here. Don't leave your floor. Victor. Not negotiable. His voice was ice. Then, softer, just for her. Please. I can't focus on the Russians if I'm worried about you. Marcus cleared his throat. There's more. They're insisting you bring your asset, the girl. They want to see her. Victor went very still. How do they know about her? Someone talked. Or they have surveillance we haven't found. Either way, they know you've acquired someone important. They want proof she's real and that you're willing to display your holdings publicly. Absolutely not. Boss, if you refuse, I said no. Victor's voice could have cut glass. Lillian is not a bargaining chip. She doesn't get paraded in front of the Bratva like livestock. Then they'll take it as weakness. Proof you're protecting her because you can't afford to lose her. Marcus looked apologetic. I'm just telling you how they'll read it. Lillian spoke before she could reconsider. I'll go. Both men turned to stare at her. No, Victor said flatly. Why not? You just told me staying with you means being part of your world. This is your world. She lifted her chin. Besides, if they think I'm important to you, my presence proves strength, not weakness. It shows you're confident enough to bring me into hostile territory. Or it makes you a target. I'm already a target. You said so yourself. Lillian moved closer to him. Let me help. Let me be more than just the voice in your study. Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him, because his resistance wavered. This is different from dinner in the garden. The Bratva are dangerous, violent. They'll see you as an opportunity to hurt me. Then don't let them. She kept her voice steady. You're Victor DeLuca. You run this city. Act like it. Marcus made a sound that might have been amusement. Victor shot him a dark look before turning back to Lillian. If you do this, you follow my lead exactly. You don't speak unless I tell you to. You don't leave my side. And if something goes wrong, you run. Understood? Understood. Mrs. Castellane will prepare you. The Bratva respect power and presentation. You'll need to look the part. He cupped her face again, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I don't like this. I know. If anything happens to you, Stas, it won't. You'll protect me. Yes, Victor said simply. I will. The next several hours passed in a blur. Mrs. Castellane appeared with a dress Lillian had never seen before, black silk that hugged every curve, with a neckline that hinted without revealing. Diamonds that were definitely real, shoes that added 3 inches to her height. Mr. DeLuca wants you to look untouchable, Mrs. Castellane explained as she helped Lillian into the dress. Rich, powerful, like you belong at his side. I don't belong at his side. Don't you? The older woman met her eyes in the mirror. You're the first person he's trusted in a decade. The first one he's chosen to protect rather than use. That seems like belonging to me. Lillian studied her reflection. The dress transformed her from invisible to undeniable. She looked like someone who mattered, someone worth fighting for. The Bratva will test you, Mrs. Castellane continued. They'll say things designed to provoke, make you react. Don't. Stay calm. Let Victor handle them. What if I can't? Then remember you survived your father selling you. You survived stitching together a wounded crime lord without flinching. You survived learning the man you're falling for turns into a beast during full moons. She adjusted Lillian's hair, pinning it into an elegant updo. You can survive one dinner with Russians. Falling for. The words echoed in Lillian's head. Was that what this was? She barely knew Victor, but she knew the shape of his shadows, the sound of his laughter, the way he looked at her like she was precious. Maybe that was enough. Victor was waiting in the foyer when she descended at 7:30. He'd changed into a black suit that probably cost more than her father's car, his hair slicked back, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. But when he saw her, something softened in those gold eyes. You're beautiful, he said quietly. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He offered his arm. Stay close to me. Trust me. And remember, you're not property tonight. You're mine by choice. That makes you infinitely more powerful than anything they can throw at you. The drive to the plaza was silent, tension thick in the car. Marcus sat up front with the driver. 3 more cars followed. Security, Lillian realized. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a show of force. The plaza's ballroom had been transformed into something from another era. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, servers in formal attire. But the people gathered there weren't celebrating. They were predators in expensive clothes, circling and assessing. Lillian felt the attention shift to them the moment they entered. Conversation stopped. Eyes tracked their movement. She kept her chin up, her hand on Victor's arm, and tried to look like she belonged. The Volkov delegation occupied the center table, 3 men and 1 woman, all radiating casual menace. The man at the head was 60, silver-haired, with eyes like chips of ice. Dmitry Volkov himself, Lillian guessed. DeLuca. Volkov's accent was thick, but his English perfect. So good of you to join us. Volkov? Victor's voice was neutral. You called a meeting. I'm here. With your pet, I see. Volkov's gaze raked over Lillian. She's prettier than I expected. Does she do tricks? Lillian felt Victor's arm tense beneath her hand. She squeezed gently. A reminder. Don't let them provoke you. Miss Hart is a guest, not a topic of discussion, Victor said coldly. Shall we get to business? Of course, please sit. Volkov gestured expansively. We have much to discuss about the future of our respective organizations. They sat. Lillian found herself across from the woman in the Volkov delegation, 40s, beautiful in a severe way, wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country. She smiled at Lillian with all teeth and no warmth. I'm Katerina, she said, Dmitry's daughter. You must tell me how you captured our Victor's attention. He's been quite the hermit these past years. I read to him, Lillian said simply. Katerina's laugh was like breaking glass. How quaint. And he keeps you for this? Reading? He keeps me because I choose to stay. The table went quiet. Katerina's smile sharpened. Brave words, or foolish ones. Let's discuss terms, Victor interjected smoothly. You wanted an alliance. What are you offering? What followed was a masterclass in negotiation. Dmitry laid out his proposal, combined territory, shared resources, a merger that would make them unstoppable. But underneath the business talk, Lillian heard the real message. Submit or be destroyed. Ally or become an enemy. Victor countered each point with precision, never quite agreeing, never outright refusing, dancing on the edge of commitment while giving nothing away. It was fascinating to watch. This was the brilliant strategist who'd consolidated the 5 families. Not through violence, but through making everyone believe alliance was their idea. Midway through the second course, Katerina turned her attention back to Lillian. Tell me, dear, do you know what happens to Victor during full moons? The question was a grenade lobbed casually across the table. The other conversation stopped. Everyone waited to see how Lillian would respond. I know, she said calmly, and you stay anyway. How devoted. Katerina's eyes glittered. Or perhaps how desperate. Tell me, what did your family sell you for? Surely DeLuca didn't acquire such a treasure cheaply. Victor's hand found Lillian's under the table. A warning. She ignored it. My family's debts are irrelevant, Lillian said. What matters is I'm here now. By choice. Choice. Katerina savored the word. What a luxury. Do you know what we do to women who get ideas about choice in our organization? Enough. Victor's voice cut through the tension. You're here to negotiate with me, Volkov, not harass my guest. Your guest? Dmitry mused. Or your weakness. We hear interesting things, DeLuca, that you're going soft, that mercy makes you vulnerable, that tomorrow's moon might be the one that finally breaks you. Tomorrow's moon is my concern. But what happens after? If you lose control? If the beast wins? Dmitri leaned forward. Who runs your empire then? The girl who reads bedtime stories? I run my empire, Victor said with quiet menace. Tomorrow, next month, next year. And I'd advise you to remember that before making assumptions about my stability. Prove it. The challenge came from one of Dmitri's men, younger, aggressive, clearly eager to escalate. Show us you're still strong enough to lead. I don't perform on command. No? Then perhaps your pet does. The young man stood, circling toward Lillian. Let's see what the great DeLuca values enough to bring into our den. Victor was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between the man and Lillian. Touch her, and die. The ballroom went silent. Security moved, Victor's men and Volkov's, everyone suddenly armed and ready. Lillian's heart hammered against her ribs. Dmitri raised one hand. Alexei, stand down. But father, I said stand down. Dmitri's voice was absolute. Alexei retreated, glowering. Dmitri turned to Victor. My apologies, young blood runs hot, but you can see our concern. You bring this woman into our meeting, claim she's important, yet react violently when she's approached. It suggests attachment. And attachment, as you know, is weakness in our world. Attachment is human, Victor said. Perhaps that's what separates us from animals. Pretty words. But tomorrow night, you'll be the animal. What then? Before Victor could respond, the unmistakable crack of gunfire erupted from outside the ballroom. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. And suddenly the formal dinner became chaos. Victor grabbed Lillian, pulling her down beneath the table as more shots rang out. Around them, guests scrambled for cover. Security drew weapons. The carefully orchestrated meeting dissolved into violence. Stay down, Victor commanded, his body shielding hers. What's happening? Ambush. Not Volkov's people. Someone else is making a move. He looked toward Marcus, who was coordinating their security detail. We need to leave. Now. But before they could move, a window exploded inward. Men in tactical gear poured through, 6, 8, 10 of them. Professional, coordinated, not random gang violence. This was a planned assault, and they were heading straight for Victor. Get her out, Victor shouted to Marcus, even as he pulled a gun from inside his jacket. I'm not leaving you, Lillian started. You don't have a choice. Victor's eyes met hers, fierce and desperate. Trust me. Go. Marcus hauled Lillian to her feet, dragging her toward a service exit. She fought him, trying to look back, to see Victor. The last glimpse she caught was him standing in the center of the ballroom, suit jacket discarded, gun raised, looking like the warrior king he'd never wanted to be. Then Marcus shoved her through the door and everything went dark. They ran through service corridors, Marcus practically carrying her. Behind them, gunfire continued, sharp bursts that echoed through the plaza's marble halls. Lillian's expensive heels caught on carpet. She kicked them off, running barefoot now, the diamonds around her neck cold against her skin. Where are we going? She gasped. Safe house. 3 blocks. Keep moving. They burst out into an alley. The February night was freezing against her bare arms. A car waited, engine running. Marcus pushed her inside and climbed in after. Drive, he barked. The car peeled out. Lillian twisted in her seat, trying to see the plaza. Smoke rose from the building. Police sirens wailed in the distance. And somewhere in that chaos, Victor was fighting for his life. We have to go back, she said. We have to help him. Best way to help him is keep you alive, Marcus said grimly. You're the target, Miss Hart. This whole thing was a setup to get at you. What, why? Because DeLuca's enemies know the truth now. They know he cares about you, and they know tomorrow night he'll be vulnerable. Marcus's expression was grim. Someone's making their move while they still can. The safe house was a brownstone in Brooklyn, nondescript and unwatched. Marcus hustled Lillian inside, where 2 more guards waited. The interior was Spartan, minimal furniture, reinforced walls, no windows on the ground floor. What now? Lillian asked. Now we wait. Marcus pulled out his phone, checking messages. His face darkened. And we pray your boy's as good as his reputation. An hour crawled by. Then 2. Marcus fielded calls, his responses terse. Lillian sat on a hard sofa, still in her ballroom dress, and tried not to imagine all the ways Victor could be hurt. Could be dying. could be already dead. At midnight, Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his shoulders dropped with relief. "He's alive," he said to Lillian. "Injured but mobile. He's coming here." "How injured?" "Didn't say, but he's conscious and giving orders, so it can't be too bad." 20 minutes later, the door opened. Victor walked in, or rather limped in, supported by two of his men. His suit was torn and blood-stained. His face was bruised, one eye swelling shut. But he was alive. Lillian crossed to him without thinking, her hands finding his face, checking for damage. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." His voice was hoarse. "You're clearly not fine." "I'm alive. That's fine enough." He caught her hands, holding them against his chest. "You're safe. That's all that matters." "What happened?" "Coordinated attack. The Volkov meeting was a trap. They knew I'd bring you. Had snipers positioned, assault teams ready. If I'd come alone, I'd be dead." He looked at Marcus. "Did we identify the shooters?" 3 different organizations. Someone put together a coalition. They're calling it the Night of Long Knives, taking out DeLuca before the full moon takes you out for them. Victor's jaw clenched. "How many of ours did we lose?" 4 dead, 6 wounded, but we got 15 of theirs, sent a message. "Not strong enough." Victor released Lillian and moved to the window despite his injuries. "They know about tomorrow. They know I'll be locked down. They're planning something bigger." "We've tripled security at the mansion," Marcus assured him. "No one's getting through." "They don't need to get through. They just need to wait until I'm transformed and helpless." Victor turned back to them. "We accelerate the timeline. I go into lockdown tonight, right now." "The moon's not full until tomorrow night," Marcus protested. "Close enough? I can feel it already, the pull, the fever. Better to secure myself early than risk losing control in the middle of a war." He looked at Lillian. "You'll stay here. Marcus and his team will protect you." "No," Lillian said. "This isn't negotiable." "I said no." She moved to stand before him. "You told me I could choose. I'm choosing to be with you. Through the transformation, through the danger, through whatever comes. I'm not hiding in Brooklyn while you lock yourself in a basement alone." "Lillian, you don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You're afraid I'll see you at your worst and run. But I've seen your worst, Victor. I stitched you back together. I listened to you describe the beast, and I'm still here." She took his hands. "Let me be there tomorrow night. Let me be the voice that anchors you." "It's too dangerous." "Everything about us is dangerous. This doesn't change that." Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he nodded. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." "Then we go home. Together." He turned to Marcus. "Assemble everyone. Full war council at the mansion in 1 hour. I want contingency plans for every scenario, including the possibility that I don't survive the night." They returned to the mansion as dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. The building had been transformed into a fortress, armed guards at every entrance, security checkpoints on every floor. Victor's remaining forces had gathered ready for siege. But first, he had to face the moon. Mrs. Castellane met them in the foyer, her face grave. "The sub-basement is prepared, restraints tested, medical team standing by." "Good." Victor's voice was steady despite his injuries. "Miss Hart will be with me, in the observation room, not the containment cell. Set up audio so she can speak to me." If Mrs. Castellane was surprised, she didn't show it. "As you wish." The sub-basement was exactly as terrible as Lillian had imagined. Concrete walls, reinforced steel doors, and at its center, a cell that looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. Chains bolted to the floor, manacles designed for something far larger than human. "This is where I'll be," Victor said quietly, standing at the cell's threshold. "When the transformation starts, they'll lock me in. The restraints will hold. They have to. But Lillian, if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Promise me if it does, you'll run. Don't try to save me. Don't try to reach me. Just run." "I promise." The lie tasted bitter, but it was what he needed to hear. Victor pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I've never let anyone see this before. The transformation, the beast. You'll be the first. Then I'll make sure I'm worthy of the privilege." He kissed her then, desperate and gentle and goodbye all at once. When he pulled back, his eyes were starting to glow with that eerie golden light. "It's starting," he said. "You need to go to the observation room, now." Lillian let Mrs. Castellane guide her to a small room adjacent to the cell, separated by reinforced glass and steel bars. A microphone sat on a console, its wire running down to speakers in the cell below. She sat down, her hands shaking, and watched as Victor stripped off his ruined suit and allowed himself to be chained. The sun was setting outside. The last light of day died slowly, painting the world in orange and shadow. And in the cell below, Victor DeLuca began to change. It started with his breathing, harsh, labored, like he couldn't quite get enough air. Then came the fever, sweat beading on his skin. His body arched, spine curving in ways that should have been impossible. And then the breaking began. Lillian watched in horror as his bones shifted beneath his skin, heard the sickening crack of them fracturing and reforming, saw his features distort, elongate, become something other than human. His hands curved into claws, his teeth lengthened into fangs. His eyes burned pure gold as his pupils changed shape. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of agony that Victor endured with barely a sound. But when it was finished, when the last ray of sunlight died and the full moon rose invisible beyond the basement walls, the thing chained in the cell was no longer a man. It was massive, 7 feet of muscle and fur and predatory grace. Wolf-like, but not quite, something caught between human and beast, belonging fully to neither. The creature's eyes were still gold, but there was no recognition in them. Only hunger. Only rage. The beast tested its chains immediately, pulling against the restraints with terrifying strength. The steel held, but barely. It snarled, a sound that made Lillian's blood run cold. Then those gold eyes found her through the observation glass. The creature went still. It tilted its head, studying her with predatory interest. Lillian's hand found the microphone, her voice shaking as she pressed the button. "Victor," she said softly, "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." The beast snarled again, lunging against the chains. They held, but the bolts in the floor groaned with the strain. "Once upon a time," Lillian continued, her voice steadier now, "there was a prince who was cursed to live between two worlds. Human by day, beast by night. He thought the curse made him a monster. But what he didn't understand was that monsters are defined by their choices, not their form." The creature stopped pulling. It watched her, panting, still clearly dangerous, but listening. The prince spent years fighting what he was, hating the beast inside him, believing that transformation meant losing his humanity. But one night, in the darkest part of his imprisonment, he realized something. The beast wasn't his enemy. It was his shadow, the part of himself he'd been taught to hate. Lillian leaned closer to the glass, speaking directly to those gold eyes that held the barest flicker of recognition. So the prince made a choice. He stopped fighting, stopped hating, started accepting that he was both man and beast, that his humanity didn't disappear during transformation, it just took a different form. And slowly, painfully, he learned to be whole. The beast sat down, still chained, still massive and terrifying, but no longer pulling against the restraints. Lillian talked through the night, told stories about transformation and acceptance, about choosing love over fear, about finding humanity in unexpected places. And the creature listened, those gold eyes never leaving her face. Somewhere above them, Victor's enemies waited for the beast to break free, waited for the moment of maximum vulnerability when they could strike. But in the basement of the mansion, in the space between monster and man, something impossible was happening. The beast was learning to be still. And Lillian Hart was learning that sometimes love meant sitting vigil in the darkness while the person you cared for fought battles you couldn't see. The night stretched on, and she kept talking, her voice the only light in the shadows. Dawn arrived like mercy. Lillian had talked through the entire night, her voice hoarse, throat raw from hours of stories. The beast in the cell below had remained still for the last 3 hours, those gold eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt almost like comprehension, almost like the man inside was listening through the monster's ears. The first rays of sunlight penetrated the small window near the ceiling of the sub-basement. The creature's head lifted, turning toward the light. A low sound emerged from its throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. Pain, Lillian realized. The transformation was beginning again. She watched as the process reversed itself. The massive frame contracted, bones cracking back into human shape. Fur receded into skin, claws softened into fingers. It was just as terrible in reverse, just as agonizing. But this time Victor made sounds. Harsh gasps, bitten off cries he couldn't quite suppress. 20 minutes later, a man hung limply in the chains, naked, covered in sweat and blood where the restraints had cut into transformed flesh. His head was bowed, dark hair falling forward to hide his face. "Victor," Lillian breathed into the microphone. He didn't move. "Victor, can you hear me?" Slowly, painfully, he lifted his head. His eyes were human again, still gold, but with pupils that recognized her. His face was haggard, drawn with exhaustion and pain. But he was himself. "Lillian," her name came out as a rasp. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." "You shouldn't have. You should have run the moment the moon rose." "Well, I didn't." She stood, pressing her hand against the observation glass. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been torn apart and put back together wrong." He attempted a smile that came out more like a grimace. "So, normal for a morning after." Mrs. Castellane appeared then, entering the cell with a medical team. They released Victor from his restraints and helped him into a robe, treating the worst of his wounds with practiced efficiency. He endured it silently, his eyes never leaving Lillian through the glass. When they'd finished, Mrs. Castellane came to the observation room. "He's asking for you." Lillian descended the stairs to the cell floor. The medical team had left, giving them privacy. Victor sat on a bench against the far wall, wrapped in a dark robe, looking utterly exhausted. But when she entered, he stood. "You look terrible," Lillian said softly. "You look beautiful." He reached for her, then stopped, looking at his hands. They were scraped raw, bruised. "I probably shouldn't touch you. I don't know what I did last night. If I hurt anyone?" "You didn't. You stayed in the cell. The chains held. Because you were here." Victor's voice was wondering. "I could hear you. Through the transformation, through the beast's mind. Your voice was there, an anchor. Did it help?" "It kept me sane. Or as close to sane as I get during full moons." He finally closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "Thank you. For staying. For talking me through it. For not being afraid. I was terrified. You didn't show it. I learned from the best." Lillian leaned into his touch. "How long until you're recovered?" "Few hours. Then we need to deal with the mess from last night." Victor's expression hardened. "The coalition that attacked us, they'll try again, probably soon while they think I'm still weak." As if summoned by his words, Marcus appeared at the cell entrance. "Boss, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind with 500 armed men surrounding the building." Victor's entire body went tense. "Which organization?" "All of them. Volkov's Bratva, the Calabrese family, the Triads, even some independents. They're calling it the Consolidation. They want you to surrender the 5 families' territory, or they're coming in." "Let them try." Victor's voice was cold. "This building has survived worse." "Not like this. They have heavy weapons, military-grade equipment, and they're demanding you come out personally to negotiate." Marcus's expression was grim. "They're giving you until noon. After that, they're coming in whether you surrender or not." Lillian felt Victor's hands tighten on her shoulders. She turned to look at him, seeing the calculation in his eyes, the exhaustion, the barely leashed violence. "How many men do we have inside?" he asked. 43. Well-armed, well-trained, but against 500. We hold until reinforcements arrive from our satellite locations. How long? 4 hours minimum. They're scattered across the city. We weren't expecting a coordinated assault this big. Of course not. They waited until after the full moon, when I'd be at my weakest. Victor released Lillian and moved toward the stairs. "Get me dressed. Body armor. Every weapon we have. And someone bring me the plans for the mansion's defensive positions." "Victor, wait," Lillian started. "Not now." His voice was pure command. "Marcus, get her to the panic room. 3rd floor, center of the building. It's reinforced steel, separate ventilation. If they breach the outer defenses, she'll be safe there." "I'm not hiding while you fight," Lillian protested. "Yes, you are." Victor turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not anger, fear, raw, desperate fear for her safety. "I can't fight them if I'm worried about you. I need to know you're protected. Please, Lillian, give me this." The please undid her. She nodded, throat tight. "Good." He started up the stairs, then paused. If something happens to me, if they get through, Mrs. Castellane has instructions. Money, documents, everything you need to disappear. Start over somewhere they'll never find you. Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't know that. I know you. Lillian moved to the base of the stairs, looking up at him. I know you're too stubborn to die before figuring out how to break this curse. So fight, survive, and come back to me. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Then he was descending the stairs again, pulling her against him, kissing her with fierce desperation. It lasted only seconds, but it felt like a promise, a vow. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I'll come back, he said roughly. I swear it. Then he was gone, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite his injuries. Marcus lingered just long enough to gesture for Lillian to follow before disappearing after his boss. Mrs. Castellane appeared, her face grave. Come, Miss Hart, we need to get you secured. The panic room was exactly as described. A steel box in the heart of the mansion with its own power supply, communications equipment, and enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. Small monitors showed views from security cameras throughout the building. Lillian watched as Victor emerged on one screen, now dressed in tactical gear, moving with lethal purpose despite his exhaustion. He'll be all right, Mrs. Castellane said, though her voice lacked conviction. He survived worse odds. Has he? No, the older woman admitted. But he's never had this much to lose before either. That might make him more dangerous than usual. On the monitors, Lillian watched Victor deploy his forces. Men took positions at windows, in hallways, on staircases. The mansion transformed from home to fortress. And outside, visible on the external cameras, the enemy gathered. Hundreds of them, just as Marcus had said. Armed, organized, waiting. The clock showed 11:45. 15 minutes until noon. What will they do? Lillian asked. Probably try to negotiate one more time, offer terms. When Victor refuses, because he will refuse, they'll attack. Mrs. Castellane's hands were steady as she checked the panic room's locks. The mansion has excellent defenses. Reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, choke points designed for exactly this kind of assault. We can hold for hours if necessary. And if they get through, then Victor will fight them room by room until there's nothing left to defend. She met Lillian's eyes. He won't surrender. It's not in his nature. He'll die first. That's not acceptable. Perhaps you should have thought of that before falling in love with a crime lord. Lillian opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. Because Mrs. Castellane was right. Somewhere between being sold and being valued, between hearing stories of curses and watching transformations, between fear and trust, she'd fallen in love with Victor DeLuca, the man and the beast. Both halves of him. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Since you stitched him back together without flinching. Most people can't look at him without seeing the monster. You see the man. Mrs. Castellane's expression softened fractionally. He needs that. Someone who sees him completely and doesn't run. I won't run. Good. Because what's about to happen will test that resolve. Noon arrived with a sound like thunder. On the monitors, Lillian saw the first wave of attackers surge toward the mansion. Victor's men opened fire from the windows, cutting down the front runners. But there were too many. For every man who fell, 3 more took his place. The external cameras showed organized chaos. Teams with battering rams approaching the reinforced doors, others throwing grappling hooks toward upper windows, still more providing covering fire. This wasn't a gang war. This was a military operation. Victor's voice crackled over the mansion's internal communications. Hold the entry points. Don't let them establish a foothold. Conserve ammunition. This is going to be a long fight. For 20 minutes, the defenses held. Victor's smaller force used superior positioning and knowledge of the building to devastating effect. Attackers fell back, regrouped, tried different approaches, but none succeeded in breaching the walls. Then the windows on the second floor exploded inward. The attackers had brought shaped charges, blowing multiple entry points simultaneously. Men poured through the openings, and suddenly the fight was inside the mansion. On the monitors, Lillian watched Victor's team fall back to defensive positions, fighting room by room just as Mrs. Castellane had predicted. Victor himself was a force of nature. Still weak from the transformation, still injured from the previous night's ambush, he moved through the chaos like death incarnate. Every movement was precise. Every shot found its target. He wasn't just fighting, he was protecting. protecting his home, his people, her. But there were too many. Slowly, inexorably, his forces were being pushed back, toward the third floor, toward the panic room. "We need to help him," Lillian said, standing. "Absolutely not." Mrs. Castellane blocked the door. "You go out there, you become a liability, a target he has to protect instead of a safe position he can fight toward. So I just watch him die? You trust that he knows what he's doing." On the screen, Victor took a bullet to the shoulder. Lillian watched him stagger, recover, keep fighting. Blood stained his tactical vest. His movements were slowing. He was running out of strength. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" Lillian asked desperately. Mrs. Castellane checked her watch. 2 hours, maybe less if they push hard. "He doesn't have 2 hours." As if to prove her point, another of Victor's men went down on the monitor, then another. The attackers were gaining ground, pushing toward the third floor, toward the panic room, toward her. Victor's voice came over the radio again, strained now. "All units, fall back to the third floor corridor. We make our stand there." Lillian counted the remaining defenders on the monitors. 15 men, against hundreds. The math was brutal, impossible. She made a decision. "Open the door," she said to Mrs. Castellane. "Miss Hart, open it. Now." Lillian's voice was hard. Final. "Victor is dying out there because he's trying to protect me, but I'm not helpless. And I'm not going to hide while he sacrifices himself." "What exactly do you plan to do?" "End this." Lillian turned to the communications console. "Can I broadcast to the entire building?" "Yes, but do it." Mrs. Castellane hesitated, then flipped a switch. A red light appeared on the console, indicating open transmission. Lillian took a breath and spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Lillian Hart, the woman you're trying to use as leverage against Victor DeLuca. I'm in the third floor panic room. I'm unarmed and alone. If you want me, come and get me. But know this, every man who dies trying to reach me is blood on your hands, not his." Silence. Then Victor's voice, harsh with panic and fury. "Lillian, what the hell are you doing? Giving them what they want. Me. Maybe if they have me, they'll stop killing your people. Don't you dare open that door. I'm sorry, Victor, but I won't let you die for me." She looked at Mrs. Castellane. "Open it." "He'll never forgive me," the older woman said. "He'll be alive to be angry. That's what matters." Mrs. Castellane's hand moved toward the lock, but before she could trigger it, the building shuddered. A massive explosion somewhere below. The monitors flickered, went dark, came back showing static. "What was that?" Lillian demanded. Mrs. Castellane was already at a different console, checking systems. Her face went pale. "They've breached the basement. Multiple entry points. They're flooding the lower levels." "How many?" "At least 100. Maybe more." She turned to Lillian, all pretense of calm gone. "They're not trying to fight their way up anymore. They're trying to collapse the building from below." A new voice came over the radio. Accented, Russian, Dmitry Volkov. "DeLuca, you fought well, but it's over. Surrender now and we'll let most of your people live. Refuse, and everyone dies when this building comes down." Victor's response was ice. "You want me? Come and take me." "I don't want you, you fool. I want the empire you've been too weak to hold. Your death is just a necessity." Volkov paused. "But I'll offer you this. Send out the girl, Lillian Hart. She comes to us unharmed. We pull back. You and your remaining men leave with your lives." "No deal." "Victor," Lillian grabbed the microphone. "I'm coming out." "Don't do this. You're not leaving that room." His voice held absolute authority. Then, softer, just for her. "I told you I'd come back. Trust me." The radio went silent. On what monitors still functioned, Lillian watched Victor move. Not toward the panic room, not toward the attackers flooding in from below. He moved toward the stairs leading down. Toward the sub-basement. "What's he doing?" Lillian asked. Mrs. Castellane's eyes widened in understanding and horror. "No, he can't. It'll kill him." "What will kill him?" "The transformation. It's been less than 12 hours since the last one. His body can't handle another change so soon. It'll tear him apart." "But," Lillian's mind raced, "if he transforms, he becomes the beast. And the beast is unstoppable." "Yes." Mrs. Castellane gripped the console. "He's going to force a transformation. Use the beast to clear the building. It's suicide." On the monitor, Victor reached the sub-basement, the same cell where Lillian had watched him transform the night before. He was stripping off his tactical gear, his movements jerky with pain and exhaustion. "There has to be another way," Lillian said desperately. "He'll die. We're all going to die if he doesn't do this." Mrs. Castellane's voice was flat, resigned. This is what he's always known, that eventually the curse would be the only weapon left. Victor's voice came over the radio one last time. "Marcus, when it starts, clear your men out. Get everyone to the upper floors. Don't try to control it. Just stay out of its way." "Boss, you can't." "That's an order." And Lillian, his voice broke slightly. "I'm sorry. I wanted more time. Wanted to find a cure. Wanted to be the man you deserved. But this is all I have left. The monster. It's always been the monster. Victor, please." Lillian was shouting into the microphone now, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do this. We'll find another way. There is no other way. I love you. Remember that when you see what I become." The radio went dead. On the monitor, Victor stood in the cell, his head bowed. Lillian could see his body beginning to shake. Could see the first signs of the transformation starting, the fever, the tremors. But this was different from the previous night. Faster. More violent. His body was fighting it, too damaged to handle another change so soon. He collapsed to his knees, his scream audible even through the steel and concrete separating them. On the monitor, his body began to break and reform. Bones snapping, muscles tearing. The transformation that had taken 2 hours the night before was happening in minutes. Forced. Agonizing. Wrong. Mrs. Castelaine turned away, unable to watch. But Lillian couldn't look away. She owed him that much, to witness what he was sacrificing, to see the cost of her survival. The beast that emerged from Victor's broken body was larger than the night before, more savage. Its eyes were pure gold fire, with no hint of human consciousness behind them. This wasn't the creature that had listened to her stories. This was something primal, mindless with rage and pain. The beast threw back its head and howled, a sound that echoed through the entire building. Then it moved. The monitor showed the carnage that followed. The beast tore through the mansion like a force of nature, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Attackers tried to shoot it. The bullets did nothing, tried to run. It was faster, tried to fight. They died. It was massacre, pure and simple. The beast didn't differentiate between friend and enemy. It just killed. Anyone in its path. Anyone foolish enough to stand against it. Blood painted the walls, screams filled the air. And through it all, the beast moved with terrible purpose, clearing the building of intruders. Lillian watched in horror as Volkov's forces fell back, their coordinated assault dissolving into panicked retreat. They poured out of the building, abandoning equipment and wounded in their desperate flight. Within 20 minutes, the mansion was clear. Empty except for Victor's surviving men huddled on the upper floors and the beast prowling the lower levels. The beast that had once been the man she loved. "It's done," Mrs. Castelaine said quietly. "They're gone. We're safe." "And Victor?" "The beast will hunt now. Anything that moves. It won't recognize allies." She checked the monitors showing the sub-basement. "If we're lucky, it'll return to the cell eventually, exhaust itself. But in its current state, driven by pain and forced transformation, I don't know. This has never happened before." On the monitors, the beast prowled through the mansion, sniffing at bloodstains, examining corpses, searching for something, for more prey, Lillian thought at first. Then she realized it was searching for her. The beast's path was deliberate, moving from room to room, floor to floor, getting closer to the third floor, to the panic room. "It's hunting me," Lillian said. "That's not possible. In this state, it shouldn't have the capacity for targeted hunting. But it is." Lillian watched the beast climb the stairs, massive head swinging back and forth. "It knows I'm here." The beast reached the third-floor corridor. Lillian could hear it now, even through the panic room's reinforced walls. The heavy tread of its footsteps, the harsh panting of its breath. It stopped outside the panic room door. Silence. Then a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine. The same sound Victor had made at dawn, when the transformation had reversed and the pain had been overwhelming. "It's in pain," Lillian realized. "The forced transformation is killing it." "Probably." Mrs. Castelaine moved toward the door controls, "which makes it more dangerous, not less." Or it makes it desperate. Lillian stood. I need to go to it. Absolutely not. Mrs. Castellane, please. Lillian met the older woman's eyes. I sat with it through one night. Talked it down from violence. Let me try again. This is different. This isn't the controlled transformation. This is a dying beast with nothing to lose. All the more reason it needs someone. Lillian moved to the door. Open it. That's not a request. Mrs. Castellane stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled. A small, sad smile. He really did choose well, she said, and opened the door. The beast was waiting in the corridor. Up close, Lillian could see how badly the forced transformation had damaged it. Blood seeped from wounds where bones had broken through skin. Its breathing was labored, its movements stiff. Those gold eyes were clouded with pain. It watched her step out of the panic room, its massive head lowering, preparing to attack. Lillian held her ground. Hello, she said softly. I know you're hurting. I know you're afraid. But I'm here, like I was last night, remember? The beast took a step forward. Lillian's heart hammered, but she didn't move. You're Victor, she continued, her voice steady. Not just the beast. Not just the curse. You're the man who built an empire on strategy instead of fear, who collects first editions and reads philosophy, who trusted me enough to show me your worst and hoped I wouldn't run. Another step. The beast was close enough now that she could feel its breath. Hot. Ragged. I love you, Lillian said clearly. Both of you, man and beast. I love the part that tells me stories about being human, and I love the part that fights to protect me. All of you, Victor. I love all of you. The beast stopped. Its head tilted, those pained eyes focusing on her with sudden intensity. So come back to me. Choose to be human again, not because the sun is rising, not because the transformation is reversing on its own. Choose it. Be stronger than the curse. Be the man I know you are. She reached out slowly, giving it time to pull away, to attack, to reject the touch. Her hand connected with its massive head, fingers sliding into blood-matted fur. Come back, she whispered. The beast shuddered, its eyes closed, and when they opened again, they held recognition. Not fully human, but not mindless either, something in between. The beast that could think, the man who wore a monster's skin. He lowered himself to the ground, lying before her in a pose that was pure submission, trust, acceptance. Lillian sank down beside the beast, her hand still on its head, tears streaming down her face. Around them, dawn light began filtering through the shattered windows. The transformation would reverse soon. But for this moment, caught between man and monster, Victor DeLuca had chosen. He'd chosen her, chosen humanity, chosen love over rage. And Lillian Hart, the daughter nobody wanted, held a beast in her arms and knew she'd found something worth every risk. She'd found home. The transformation reversed slowly this time, as if Victor's body was reluctant to let go of the beast. Lillian stayed beside him through all of it, her hand never leaving him even as fur became skin, as claws softened to fingers, as the massive frame contracted into human proportions. She watched bones knit themselves back together, watched wounds close that should have been fatal. The curse was brutal, but it was also resilient. It didn't let its host die easily. When it was finished, Victor lay on the corridor floor in human form, unconscious and barely breathing. Blood covered him, some his own, most from the men he'd killed. Mrs. Castellane appeared with blankets and the medical team, their faces carefully neutral as they worked to stabilize him. He needs a hospital, one of the medics said, checking Victor's vitals. Internal bleeding, possible organ damage, severe trauma. No hospitals. Mrs. Castellane's voice was absolute. We treat him here. Bring everything we need from the medical supplies. Set up in his bedroom. They carried Victor upstairs, Lillian following close behind. His bedroom was on the 5th floor, a space she'd never seen before. It was surprisingly austere, a large bed, minimal furniture, walls lined with more books. The only personal touch was a photograph on the nightstand, old and faded. A woman with kind eyes holding a dark-haired boy. Victor's mother, Lillian realized. Dead long before the curse could claim her son. The medical team worked efficiently, hooking Victor to IVs, monitoring his heart rate, treating the worst of his injuries. Lillian sat in a chair beside the bed, refusing to leave despite Mrs. Castellane's gentle suggestions that she rest. "How long until he wakes up?" Lillian asked. "Hours, maybe days. His body needs time to heal from forcing two transformations so close together." The older woman's expression was grave. "He's strong, but even strength has limits." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face showing exhaustion and fresh bruises. "Status report. We lost 8 men, 19 wounded, but the building is secure. Volkov's coalition scattered. We're tracking them, picking off stragglers." "And Volkov himself?" Mrs. Castellane asked. "Gone to ground, but he won't stay hidden long. Not after this." Marcus looked at Victor's unconscious form. "He'll want revenge for the humiliation, for the losses." "Let him come." Lillian's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. "We'll be ready." Marcus studied her with new respect. "Yes, ma'am. I believe you will be." Over the next 3 days, the mansion transformed from battlefield to fortress. Repairs were made, defenses strengthened, new security systems installed. Victor's remaining forces rallied, reinforcements arriving from satellite locations throughout the city. Word spread through Manhattan's underworld about what had happened, how DeLuca had turned into a beast and slaughtered hundreds, how his woman had walked out to face the monster unarmed and brought it to heel with words alone. The story grew with each telling, becoming legend. Some said Lillian was a witch. Others claimed she was cursed herself. A few whispered that she was simply the only person Victor DeLuca had ever loved, and love was the strongest magic of all. Lillian ignored the rumors and stayed by Victor's bedside. She read to him from his collection of first editions, talked about the repairs being made to his home, told him stories about the man she'd come to know. She slept in the chair beside his bed, waking every few hours to check his breathing. Mrs. Castellane brought her food, changes of clothes, gentle reminders to care for herself. On the morning of the 4th day, Victor's eyes opened. Lillian was reading aloud from Dante when she felt him watching her. She looked up to find those gold eyes fixed on her face, fully conscious and aware. "You're awake," she breathed. "You're still here." His voice was rough from disuse. "Where else would I be?" "Safe. Far away from me." Victor tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the pillows. "How long?" 3 days. You forced a transformation. Nearly died. Do you remember?" "I remember everything." His jaw clenched. "I remember killing them. Dozens of them. I remember the beast's hunger for violence. And I remember—" He stopped, his eyes finding hers with painful intensity. "I remember hearing your voice, feeling your hand, choosing to stop." "You did stop. You chose humanity over rage." "Barely." Victor's hand found hers, gripping it like a lifeline. "Lillian, I could have killed you. Should have, in that state. The forced transformation destroyed what little control I had. But somehow, you reached me anyway. Because you wanted to be reached. Because under the beast, you're still Victor DeLuca, and Victor DeLuca doesn't hurt the people he loves." His breath caught. "I told you I loved you before the transformation. I meant it." "I know. I love you too." The words came easily now, natural as breathing. "Both of you, man and beast." Victor pulled her down to him, kissing her with desperate relief. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I don't deserve you." "We've had this argument. You lost." Lillian smiled against his mouth. "Besides, deserving has nothing to do with it. I choose you. You choose me. That's all that matters." "It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple." She pulled back to look at him directly. "The world will complicate it. Your enemies will try to use me against you. The curse will always be there, making everything harder. But at the core, it's simple. We choose each other, every day, through everything." Victor studied her face as if memorizing it. "You've changed. You're not the frightened woman your father sold 8 weeks ago." "No, I'm not." Lillian considered this. "I think I've been asleep most of my life, going through motions, trying to be what others wanted. But you woke me up, made me realize I could choose who I wanted to be." "And who do you want to be?" "Yours, if you'll have me." "There's nothing I want more." Victor's hand cupped her face. "But you need to understand what that means. The curse isn't going away. I'll transform every full moon for the rest of my life. It will always be dangerous. I will always be dangerous." Then we'll manage it. Together. Lillian's voice was firm. Last night proved something, Victor. Your voice anchors me during transformations. Maybe we can use that, build on it, find a way to give you more control even in beast form. You want to try to train the beast? He looked incredulous. I want to integrate it. Stop treating it as the enemy and start accepting it as part of you. The curse won't break. You've tried everything. But maybe it doesn't need to break. Maybe you just need to stop fighting it. Victor was quiet for a long moment. That's actually brilliant and terrifying. Most good ideas are both. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, looking relieved to see Victor awake. Boss? Good to have you back. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind where Dmitry Volkov is requesting a meeting. Says he wants to negotiate terms of surrender. Victor's expression hardened. His surrender or mine? His, actually. Apparently word got out about what you did, how you transformed to protect your territory. Every organization in the city is rethinking their position. Volkov's coalition is fracturing. He's trying to cut a deal before his own people turn on him. Where does he want to meet? Neutral ground, the cathedral, tonight at 8. Bold choice, sacred ground. Victor looked at Lillian. What do you think? The fact that he was asking her opinion, including her in the decision, made warmth bloom in her chest. I think Volkov respects power. You just proved you're more powerful than he imagined. But he's also desperate, which makes him dangerous. If you go, bring overwhelming force. Make it clear that mercy is a choice, not a weakness. Marcus nodded approvingly. Smart. I'll arrange full security detail. And Lillian comes with me, Victor added. Both Marcus and Lillian stared at him. Victor, that's not necessary, Lillian started. Yes, it is. They need to see us together, need to understand that you're not my weakness, you're my strength, the woman who can face a beast and bring it to heel. That's power, Lillian, real power, and I want them to know it. The cathedral was magnificent in the evening light, its Gothic spires reaching toward a darkening sky. Lillian walked beside Victor up the steps, very aware of the security details surrounding them. Victor moved carefully, still healing, but he'd refused painkillers. He needed to be sharp for this meeting. Inside, the cathedral was nearly empty. Just Dmitry Volkov and Katerina waiting in a front pew, with a handful of their own guards positioned discreetly. A priest watched from the altar, clearly uncomfortable with this use of his church, but unable to refuse. Volkov stood as they approached. He looked older than he had at the plaza, defeat written in the lines of his face. DeLuca, Miss Hart, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes, Victor said coldly. Speak. I underestimated you. We all did. Thought the curse made you weak, vulnerable. Volkov's accent was thicker than usual, stress bleeding through. We were wrong. You're not weak. You're the most dangerous man in this city, possibly the most dangerous man in the country. Flattery won't save you. I'm not offering flattery. I'm offering truth. Volkov gestured to the pews. May we sit? I'm an old man. This conversation requires comfort. Victor glanced at Lillian, who nodded. They sat, maintaining distance from the Russians. Katerina watched them with barely concealed hostility. You destroyed my coalition, Volkov continued. Killed over 100 men in a single night. The survivors are telling stories about a demon, a beast that bullets couldn't stop. They're terrified of you now, not just respectful, genuinely afraid. Good. Fear prevents stupid decisions. Indeed. Which is why I'm here to propose a treaty. Not an alliance, not a merger, just coexistence. You keep your territory, I keep mine. We establish clear boundaries and respect them. And if I refuse, Victor asked, if I decide to take your territory by force, then I fight, and I lose, and hundreds more die. Volkov's voice was weary. I've been at this game 40 years, DeLuca. I know when I'm beaten. You've proven yourself stronger. I'm asking for the chance to retreat with dignity. Lillian watched Victor consider this. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options. He could crush Volkov completely, absorb his territory, eliminate a rival forever. But it would cost lives, resources. And it would make him the monster everyone already feared. What do you think? Victor asked her quietly. Katerina's eyes widened slightly. Volkov looked surprised. Asking a woman's opinion in their world was unheard of. Lillian thought carefully before responding. I think you've spent 12 years trying to build an empire that doesn't rely purely on fear and violence. Crushing Volkov completely would undo that work. But showing mercy, establishing boundaries and actually respecting them, that's a different kind of strength, the kind that lasts. Victor smiled slightly. Then he turned back to Volkov. You heard the lady. We have a treaty. Your territory remains yours. Mine remains mine. Cross the boundaries, and what happened 4 nights ago will look like mercy. Understood. Understood. Volkov extended his hand. After a moment, Victor shook it. One more thing, Victor added. You tell everyone exactly what happened. Not rumors, not legends. The truth. That I can control the transformation. That the beast follows my will. Let them know that attacking me doesn't mean facing a monster. It means facing someone who can be both man and monster and choose which is more useful. Clever, Volkov acknowledged. Turn the curse into a weapon instead of a weakness. I learned from the best teacher, Victor glanced at Lillian, someone who sees strength in unexpected places. They left the cathedral as night fell fully over Manhattan. In the car, Victor pulled Lillian against his side, his arm around her shoulders. Thank you, he said quietly, for your counsel, for seeing what I was too angry to see. You would have reached the same conclusion eventually. Maybe. But you got me there faster, and with fewer bodies. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You're good at this. At the strategy and politics of my world. I had a good teacher, someone who showed me that power can be more than violence. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Victor spoke again, his voice thoughtful. There's something I need to tell you about the engagement Volkov mentioned, the heiress I was supposed to marry. Lillian had almost forgotten about that. What about her? Her name is Victoria Ashford. Old money, impeccable bloodlines, absolutely no interest in actually marrying me. The engagement was arranged by our families. Her father wanted the protection my name provides. I wanted the legitimacy her family's reputation offers. It was purely transactional. Was? I ended it 3 days ago. Had Marcus deliver the message while I was unconscious. Victor's voice was dry. Apparently, I was very diplomatic about it in the letter Mrs. Castellane helped him compose. Wished her well, released her from all obligations, even offered a generous settlement for the inconvenience. How did she respond? With relief, from what Marcus said. She's apparently been involved with someone else for years. My near-death experience gave us both an excuse to end something neither of us wanted. Lillian absorbed this. So you're free. So I'm free. Victor turned to face her fully, which means I can offer you a choice without complications. Stay with me because you want to, not because you have to. Your father's debt is forgiven. You could leave tomorrow with enough money to start fresh anywhere you want, or you stay. Not as payment for a debt, not as an employee or a possession, as my partner, in every sense of the word. Lillian's heart raced. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'll choose this life, knowing what it means, the danger, the violence, the curse that will never fully go away. I'm asking if you'll stand beside me not because you're trapped, but because you want to. Victor, I know it's insane. We've known each other less than 2 months, but I've lived a lifetime in those 2 months, died and come back, found humanity in the beast and peace in the chaos. All because of you. His hands framed her face. I love you, Lillian Hart, completely, desperately, and I want you to choose me with full knowledge of what that means. Lillian thought about Queens, about her father's indifferent dismissal and her sister's casual cruelty, about feeling invisible in her own life, unwanted in her own home. Then she thought about the past 8 weeks, discovering that her voice had power, that her presence mattered, that love could exist in the darkest places. I choose you, she said simply, not because I have nowhere else to go, not because I'm afraid of being alone, but because with you, I'm more myself than I've ever been. Because you see me completely and don't flinch. Because I love you, Victor DeLuca. Man and beast. Both halves of a complicated whole. Victor kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a real smile, open and genuine. Then let's go home, he said. We have work to do. The work began immediately. Over the next weeks, Victor and Lillian developed a system for managing the transformations. She would be in the observation room every full moon, her voice transmitted into the cell. They experimented with different stories, different tones, finding what worked best to keep Victor anchored to his humanity, even in beast form. Slowly, incrementally, they made progress. The beast became more responsive to her voice, began to recognize her specifically, even in its transformed state, learned to sit, to stay, to resist the impulse toward mindless violence. It would never be fully tamed, the curse was too strong for that, but it could be managed, controlled, integrated. Victor also began the difficult work of transforming his empire from the inside. With Lillian's counsel, he started shifting toward more legitimate businesses, real estate development, technology investments, venture capital. The criminal enterprises would never fully disappear. Too much of his power base depended on them, but they could be reduced, made less violent, more ethical, if such a thing was possible in his world. It was slow work. Some of his people resisted. A few left, unwilling to adapt to the new direction. But most stayed, recognizing that Victor's approach was actually making them stronger. The other families watched warily, waiting to see if mercy would make him vulnerable. It didn't. 6 months after the night of the siege, Lillian stood in the mansion's library reading through reports Marcus had compiled. They'd successfully absorbed 3 smaller organizations into their structure, not through violence, but through offering better terms than their competitors. Revenue was up. Casualties were down. The empire was thriving. Victor found her there as evening fell, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You look serious." "I'm thinking about your father," Lillian said, "about how he ran things through pure brutality, and how you've proven there's a different way. Well, he would have hated what we're building." "Good. That means we're doing it right." She turned in his arms. "The full moon is tomorrow night. Are you ready?" "With you, always." Victor kissed her softly. "You know what tomorrow is, don't you?" "Tuesday?" "The 6-month anniversary of the night you stitched me back together. The night everything changed." Lillian smiled. "Has it really been 6 months?" 6 months of you transforming my life more thoroughly than any curse ever could." Now Victor's expression turned serious. "I have something for you. Come with me." He led her up to the rooftop garden, where the impossible cherry tree was blooming again, despite the season being wrong. In the center of the garden, a small table had been set with dinner for 2. Candles flickered in the twilight. It was achingly romantic. "Victor, this is beautiful." "Sit with me," he said, pulling out her chair. "I want to ask you something." They sat beneath the cherry blossoms, and Victor took both her hands in his. "Lillian, you came into my life as payment for a debt. But you've become so much more. You're my anchor, my conscience, my partner in every way that matters. You've helped me build something better than what my father left me. You've taught me that the beast doesn't have to be the enemy, that strength can look like mercy, that love is possible even in the darkest places." Tears pricked Lillian's eyes as she realized where this was going. "I don't have a ring yet. I wanted to wait until you said yes to have one made specifically for you. But I'm asking now, under these trees that bloom out of season, because magic exists in unexpected ways. Lillian Hart, will you marry me? Will you stand beside me through transformations and treaties, through full moons and empire building? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Lillian said through tears. 1,000 times yes." Victor pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious beyond measure. Around them, cherry blossoms fell like snow, and Manhattan glittered beneath the rising moon. The wedding took place 3 months later in the mansion's ballroom, carefully timed to fall between full moons. It was small by crime lord standards, just Victor's inner circle, Mrs. Castellane, who'd become like a mother to Lillian, and a handful of allies. Lillian had invited her own mother, who'd declined politely, saying the trip from Queens was too difficult. Her father and sister hadn't responded at all. Lillian found she didn't care. The family she'd built here mattered more than the one that had sold her. She wore white, a dress Mrs. Castellane had helped her choose, elegant and simple. Victor wore black as always, but his eyes were warm as she walked toward him. No one gave her away. She walked alone, choosing him of her own free will. The ceremony was brief. The celebration afterward was genuine. Marcus gave a surprisingly eloquent toast about how Lillian had saved their boss's life in more ways than one. Mrs. Castellane cried, though she tried to hide it. And when Victor kissed his new wife, The assembled criminals and reformed gangsters cheered like they were at any normal wedding. Later, as they stood on the rooftop garden watching the city, Lillian leaned against Victor's shoulder. "What do you think happens now?" "Now we live," Victor said simply. "We manage the curse. We build the empire. We face whatever comes together." Sounds exhausting. Probably. He tilted her face up to kiss her, but also worthwhile. The first year of their marriage brought challenges neither had anticipated. A rival organization tried to use Lillian as leverage, kidnapping her from a charity event. They'd clearly expected her to be helpless. Instead, they'd gotten a woman who'd spent a year learning strategy from Victor and self-defense from Marcus. By the time Victor's team arrived, she'd already talked her way free and convinced two of her captors to switch sides. Victor had been equal parts furious and impressed. The curse continued its monthly cycle, but each transformation became slightly more manageable. Lillian's presence helped, but they also found that certain medications could ease the worst of the pain. A doctor in Victor's employ, someone who specialized in rare genetic conditions, suggested gene therapy trials that might eventually lessen the severity. It wasn't a cure, but it was hope. 2 years after their wedding, Lillian sat in the study where she'd first told Victor stories, reading through proposals for a new initiative. Victor had decided to establish a foundation, ostensibly for community development, but really to help people in situations like Lillian had been in. People sold for debts, trapped in bad situations, with no way out. "We can't save everyone," Victor had said when proposing the idea. "But we can save some. Give them what I gave you, a choice." The foundation would provide debt relief, job training, housing assistance. It would operate quietly, carefully, to avoid attention. But it would make a difference. Lillian looked up as Victor entered the study, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He'd aged well over the past 2 years, a few more lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples. But he moved with the same predatory grace, and his eyes still burned gold when he looked at her. "Productive day?" he asked, handing her a glass. "Very. The foundation is almost ready to launch. We've identified our first 20 candidates for assistance." She accepted the wine, then noticed his expression. "What?" "I have news about the curse." Lillian set down her glass. "What kind of news?" "The gene therapy trials. They worked. Not completely. The transformation will still happen. But the severity should be reduced by nearly 40%. Less pain, faster shifts, more control." Victor's voice held cautious hope. "The next full moon will be the first real test." "That's incredible, Victor. It means we're not just managing the curse anymore. We're actually changing it, making it more survivable." He pulled her to her feet, into his arms. "Because of you. Your insistence that we could find a different way, that the beast didn't have to be the enemy." "We found it together," Lillian corrected. "Like we find everything." The full moon that month proved the treatment worked. Victor's transformation was faster, less agonizing, and the beast that emerged was noticeably more coherent. It recognized Lillian immediately, approaching the observation glass and pressing its massive head against it. She put her hand on the glass, and the beast mirrored the gesture from the other side. Progress. Real, measurable progress. 3 years into their marriage, Lillian stood on a stage in a community center in Queens speaking to a room full of women. The foundation had grown beyond their initial vision, now helping hundreds of people across the city. This particular event was for women trapped in debt marriages sold by their families with nowhere to turn. "I was you," Lillian said, her voice carrying through the room. 3 years ago, my father sold me to pay his gambling debts. I walked into a car thinking my life was over, that I'd never matter to anyone again." She saw recognition in many faces, understanding, shared pain. "But I was wrong. My life wasn't ending, it was beginning. I went from being invisible to being seen. From worthless to valued. Not because someone rescued me, but because I learned to rescue myself, to claim my own worth instead of accepting what others decided I deserved." Lillian smiled, gesturing to the foundation representatives positioned around the room. "These people can help you with the practical things. Debt relief, job placement, housing. But the real work, the work of believing you deserve better, that's something only you can do. I'm here to tell you it's possible, that you're stronger than you know, that your worth isn't determined by who wanted you or who didn't. It's determined by who you choose to be." After the presentation, women approached her with stories and questions. Lillian listened to each one, seeing herself in their struggles. She couldn't save everyone, but she could offer what had been offered to her, a choice, a chance, the knowledge that their stories didn't have to end in shadows. Victor was waiting when she returned to the mansion that evening, standing in the foyer with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What's wrong?" Lillian asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong. Something's different." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "I got the test results back from the latest gene therapy round." "And?" "The curse is weakening. Not gone. It will never be fully gone. But the transformations are becoming less severe each month. In another year, maybe 2, they might be manageable enough that I could maintain consciousness through them. Stay myself even in beast form." Lillian's breath caught. "Victor, it would mean winning, not defeating the curse. I don't think that's possible, but integrating it so completely that it stops being a curse and just becomes part of who I am. Man and beast, coexisting peacefully." His eyes shone with barely contained emotion. "That's what you've given me, Lillian. Not a cure. Something better. Acceptance. The ability to stop fighting myself and just be whole." She kissed him then, pouring years of love and struggle and triumph into it. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "We did this together," she said. "Every step, every choice, every full moon we survived." "Together," Victor agreed. "Always together." 5 years after Lillian Hart walked into a black sedan thinking her life was over, she stood in the mansion's library with Victor, reviewing the latest reports. The foundation had helped over 2,000 people. The empire had successfully shifted 60% of its revenue to legitimate sources. And the curse, while still present, had become so manageable that Victor's last transformation had lasted only 4 hours instead of 12, with him maintaining enough awareness to respond to Lillian's voice throughout. They'd built something together. Not perfect, not without shadows, but theirs. "Do you ever regret it?" Victor asked one evening as they sat in the rooftop garden beneath the eternally blooming cherry tree. "Staying, choosing this life instead of walking away when you had the chance." Lillian considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain, the violence we couldn't prevent, the people we couldn't save. But staying, choosing you? Never, not for a second. Even though I'm still cursed, still dangerous, you're also brilliant and strategic and surprisingly kind when you let yourself be. You built an empire on brains instead of brutality. You help people society has thrown away. You love me with an intensity that should be terrifying but somehow just feels like coming home." She turned to face him fully. "The curse is part of you, Victor, but it's not all of you, and I love all of you." "I used to think the curse was a punishment," Victor said quietly, "for my family's sins, for my own darkness. But meeting you changed that. Now I think maybe it was preparation, a way of making sure that when I found someone worth being human for, I'd appreciate it, fight for it, never take it for granted." Very philosophical for a crime lord. "I learned from the best." He pulled her into his lap, his arms secure around her. "Tell me a story, Mrs. DeLuca." Lillian settled against his chest, thinking. Once upon a time, there was a daughter that nobody wanted. She was sold to pay a debt delivered to a monster in the dark. Everyone said her life was ending, but they were wrong. Were they? Yes. Because the monster wasn't a monster at all, just a man who'd forgotten how to be human. And the unwanted daughter wasn't defective. She'd just been looking for someone who could see her clearly. Together they learned that curses can be managed, that empires can be transformed, and that love can exist in the darkest places. "How does the story end?" Victor asked, his breath warm against her ear. Lillian smiled, looking out at Manhattan's glittering lights. At the city they'd helped reshape. At the life they'd built from pieces of broken things. "It doesn't end," she said. "It just keeps beginning. Every day, every full moon, every choice they make to stand together against whatever comes. That's not an ending. That's a lifetime." Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, free and genuine and full of joy. "A lifetime. I like that better than happily ever after." "So do I." Lillian turned in his arms to kiss him. "Besides, we're not the happily ever after type. No, we're the fight through hell and come out stronger type." "Exactly." They sat in the garden as night fell over the city, the cherry blossoms drifting around them like snow. Somewhere below, the empire they'd built together hummed with activity. The foundation helped another person escape their debt. The legitimate businesses turned another profit. The curse waited for its monthly cycle, weakened but not defeated. And in the garden, the woman nobody wanted and the man afraid of his own darkness held each other and chose, again, to face whatever came next together. Not because they had to, not because of debts or curses or obligations, but because they'd learned the most important lesson of all, that worth isn't measured by what you can give or what you can become. It's measured by who you choose to be and who chooses you in return. Lillian Hart had been sold for $300,000, but she'd found something priceless. A love that saw past curses and defects and shadows to the truth underneath. She mattered. Not because she could anchor a beast or run a foundation or navigate crime lord politics. She mattered because she existed. Because she'd chosen to claim her own value instead of accepting what others decided she deserved. And Victor DeLuca, the monster in the dark, had learned that humanity wasn't something you lost during transformation. It was something you chose every day to hold on to. Together, they'd taken a transaction and transformed it into partnership, taken payment and turned it into choice, taken a curse and made it survivable. They'd built a different kind of power, not the kind that came from fear or violence or bloodlines, the kind that came from two broken people deciding to be whole together. And that power, the power of choosing love in the darkness, of seeing each other completely and not flinching, of building something beautiful from impossible pieces, that power would last longer than any empire. It would last a lifetime. The end.